It's my great privilege to welcome to the stage for a keynote address Mr. S. Krishnan, Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. So the floor is all yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I understand we are almost at the last leg of the Global Technology Summit this year, and I think it's very heartening to see so many members in the audience still wrapped in attention late on a Saturday evening on what has been at the end of what has been a fairly intense 3.5 days of discussions on a range of issues on global technology. Today, I've been asked to speak about what India plans to do and how India plans to work on the AI summit that our Prime Minister had offered to host at the time of the Paris AI summit. Many of my colleagues have been part of various panels and other discussions in the past 3 days on a range of issues. Most issues about AI and India's approach to AI would have been covered in many of these discussions. The one thing which is very clear about AI is that we have news every week, sometimes news every other day, and we need to keep catching up. And part of the way that we have approached it in the past little more than a year since the India AI mission was announced in March of 2024, and before that, when India started off on having a national strategy on AI with a paper from the Niti Aayog and so on, has fundamentally been that we've been flexible in our approach to this. Right from the beginning, we decided not to be doctrinaire, not to be dogmatic and say that safety is the biggest concern, we have to regulate, we have to look at these issues. We felt right up front, and this is something which the Prime Minister, and right from the top, this was a feeling that this is an opportunity. It depends on how well we use it, how we seize it, and we have to look at what the challenges are and see how we address our challenges in making most of this opportunity. So from that perspective, I think we've been open on this entire issue, and we've also followed what the global governance has been sort of looking at on the AI issue. We've been in the forefront of that. In 2023, we were the chair of the GPAI, of the Global Partnership on AI. You would recall that we hosted 2 summit events here in Delhi, both of them which brought in a lot of energy, particularly of innovation, with lots of startups and others getting into the act in a big way. It is with the same spirit that we've approached the 3 AI summits that have been held so far. The first one, the AI Safety Summit at Bletchley Park, late in 2023, subsequently the summit in Seoul, and of course, the summit earlier this year in February in Paris, where India was invited to be the co-chair. As you can see, the theme of these summits have moved from safety to action in the Paris summit. Now, we believe it is time to start talking about impact. It's been almost about 2 to 3 years of this journey, and I think many people are impatient to see actual impact of what AI can do and what AI can deliver and what can actually happen. And when we say impact again, I think we need to look at it in a positive framework in terms of what it can actually deliver. The expectations and hopes in terms of what AI can do for India, a country like India, and likewise the rest of the global south in terms of raising the overall productivity in various real sectors of the economy, in ensuring that there is greater efficiency and effectiveness in governance, and thereby sort of significantly improving economic growth and promoting prosperity is the one angle that I think is foremost in India's mind, and how we can actually be disruptive in enabling this through innovation and startup-driven approach is what India is seriously looking at, and I think this is an approach that needs to be looked at in the rest of the world as well. Initially, of course, there were a number of fears about the overall costs, whether it's affordable for a country like India, whether we can actually get the compute capacity together, whether we can get the human resources together to actually build models, whether we can create applications which can be sort of deployed in the field and so on. But if you look at the India AI mission and the 7 verticals there, I think it addresses the entire slew of issues. There is something in it literally for everybody. In terms of enterprises, researchers, and others wanting access to AI compute, which is a primary requirement. Clearly, there is a vertical which addresses that, and already we have about 15,000 GPU worth of compute already available, plus more to be added in due course. Likewise, if you look at what is happening on the models front, we should very shortly be announcing which one will be the first of the India Foundation models to be built. There is work going on there. If you come to the issue of data, and data is a critical element of what needs to be done, we launched the AI Kosh as a platform where about 300 plus data sets are already being shared and more are being added as we speak. And if you come to the issue of applications, and which is where I think most of the action will lie in a country like India, we again find that there has been tremendous enthusiasm, more than 900 applications for the first round and more than a similar number in the second round. Currently, most of them are confined to areas of governance which the government is interested in, but increasingly we believe it needs to be thrown open to look at other challenges which address society at large or the economy at large, and we'll have to see how we take it forward. So all of this means that we have addressed each of these segments. Likewise, in the skilling segment, we have to look at it all the way at the top of the line in terms of having, very, very competent and capable PhD candidates who can work on many of these research projects, and which is what has driven most of the AI research around the world, and we are supporting that, all the way down to ITI Polytechnic level students who can help with data annotation, and there could be a large number of jobs there. And the real story, I think, for India's ITES industry, in a sense, it's for them possibly another Y2K moment in terms of ensuring that most of the applications which are being developed are effectively laid out and delivered and actually deployed in a number of organizations, whether they are government organizations, enterprises, firms, and so on. So that would be a huge opportunity for them. So in that sense, if you really look at what it all offers for India, and through India to the rest of the world, given our overall DPI story, eventually, probably, as the Prime Minister indicated, and as the Minister for Electronics and Information Technology also spoke about earlier in Parliament, the issue is really, I think, eventually to have a DPI layer kind of interacting with AI and enabling that to actually be used more widely so that there's even more innovation, not just at the application level, but at the agent level, agentic level, in order to take it to the next stage of how it can be applied. And this is clearly something that we can share with the rest of the world where it is needed. Data center capacities will have to come up. India is a good location where this can be created. Likewise, the compute capacity where it comes up will need to be shared with other places in the world where it requires to be created. We've had discussions with the United Nations as well to see how this could be enabled. So in that sense, India not just wants to use AI as something that it can do for itself, but wants to sort of take a leadership position on behalf of the Global South in seeing that it is deployed across the world. So these are the efforts that we are making, and I think the key element of the way the government is working on AI is that it's a complete collaborative approach. No part of the India AI mission actually works in isolation of either private sector, academia, or civil society. We have continuous engagements on each of these verticals, and it's been a collaborative effort in which we would like to continue. And it's that theme in terms of bringing in more and more stakeholders. That is the theme we would like to take into the AI Impact Summit, which we would host early next year, and ensure that multiple stakeholders become part of this, and we should be able to actually showcase all that has been done here and in other parts of the world in terms of impact by then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that powerful keynote which sets the stage for the panel titled India's AI Summit, The Road Ahead. Please welcome to the stage for this panel Sunil Abraham, Public Policy Director, Data Economy and Emerging Tech, Meta India, Henri Verdier, French Ambassador for Digital Affairs, Nitarshan Rajkumar, Vice Chair, EU's General Purpose AI Code of Practice. This session will be moderated by Shalini Kapoor, volunteer, Ekstep Foundation, and author, AI for You. Can we have the video, please? Shalini, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. It's definitely Saturday evening, and I'm sure everybody wants to go home. We have debated, talked, learned, networked, collaborated, and made our plans for next week as well of what meetings to continue. But yes, right now, we have the esteemed panel with us. So let's discuss about the AI Summit for Impact, which is going to happen next year, and do a bit of brainstorming or thinking in a bit of unstructured way. We don't want to be structured like, end of Saturday. So I think I'll do a quick round first with each one of you, which is, go back in some time and then quickly go ahead in some time, right? Sorry, this is not the questions which I had sent to you. Yeah. So you go back, you are sitting in, and almost all of you, I think at least 3 of you were also in the Paris Summit. So you have to go back and you have to think in the Paris Summit, and definitely the first question is to you, Krishnan sir. You were sitting there and you were thinking about India. This is what I will not do, and this is what I will do.
Interesting. I think what we will do, I think there are 2 things we will certainly do. I think one thing is collaborate and make sure that in each of these areas that concern us, we work with as broad a cross-section as we can actually collect and put together. I think this is something which is fairly apparent from across the world. I attended a G7 plus a few other countries, a meeting in Rome last year. And I think the emphasis there was very clear that unless all of these like-minded countries, democratic countries, collaborate and put together enough capacities in every sense of the word, whether it is compute, whether it is model creation, applications, skilling, all of that needs to come together in order to enable the delivery to across the world and to make sure that it is democratic and inclusive. And that's clearly India's position on that. It needs to be democratic, it needs to be inclusive, it needs to get everyone in, and whatever we can do on this bit, we'll certainly do. So this is what we want to do. Now, what we will not do is throttle an opportunity. So that is something we are fairly clear about. Interestingly, many people initially, it was even the word regulation was a not so good word. Fundamentally, people assume that regulation means that you'll promptly throttle innovation. But I think as we are thinking about it, we had put out a consultation paper which had been prepared, a report which had been prepared by a subcommittee headed by the principal scientific advisor on AI governance and what approach we take. And we got some very interesting inputs on that paper. And some of it actually showed us that the regulation that we are thinking about shouldn't be just about regulating and putting guardrails on AI and don't do this and don't do this, but actually find ways to enable it. And there could be certain regulatory measures we need to take to make the path for application of AI or development of AI, deployment of AI much easier. So I think there were some very interesting suggestions around that. So that way we are fairly clear that we don't want to throttle the opportunity.
Great. Not throttling the opportunity, and also I think what you're talking about is that for AI adoption to happen, you need to have the right framework so that people know, like, when road safety was created, pedestrian did not know, the car driver did not know what to do, but a certain bit of rules kind of enabled more highways to happen, more pedestrians to come over safely. So thank you, Andre. You have to, go back into the past and imagine the future and say what is it that you definitely do not want to get repeated, and what is your expectations?
But that's not the question. The question is, something was born in Bletchley Park. Korea did build upon this. We did build upon Korea. India will go further. So the question is not, you cannot repeat the French summit. By the way, there is something you cannot do. That's to propose to India to co-chair the summit, because you chair the summit, so you cannot co-chair the summit. So we did try to do something. So in Bletchley Park was convened around one important question, that is are there existential risks? I think that now every government knows that they have to consider this question and to be prepared mentally for this. So Korea did speak a bit more about innovation. We tried to propose a broad conversation regarding opportunities and risks. That's not by coincidence that President Macron and President von der Leyen did announce engagement. That's because we wanted to show that we believe in this technology and we want to develop innovation. But we wanted also to, our conviction is that innovation doesn't automatically lead to progress. Innovation is innovation, for good or bad. If you want innovation to become progress, you need good policies, you need governance that is not always regulation, but sometimes regulation. You need investment, we need common knowledge and common resources, and open source, and cooperation, and competition, and so you have to design something. And probably the conversation in Paris was about this. And I feel that we did succeed at least to frame this conversation. So now we have to invade this framework and to work and to propose and to find solutions, and maybe to pass the mic to my neighbor. Maybe I want to commend the Indian project to focus on impact, and it gave me a title. That's just to say that maybe there are existential risks, but there are also existential needs, and we need to address existential needs. If we don't use AI to improve by, 10% the agricultural efficiency in developing countries, we are criminals. If we don't use AI to build better education systems, we are criminals. So, but for this, we needed to start from existential risks because they do exist, and then to propose a broader conversation, and then to focus on, so that like in rugby, in France we play rugby, so we pass the ball to the other one.
Yeah, so design and how we do it well is important. So I'll come to you, Nitarsh. To look into the future, we always have to look at history. And you had really good feedback from what happened, what did not happen. We would like to hear your insights.
Yeah, and I should start by saying that I'm speaking in an individual capacity. I have a bit of a luxury in being able to do that. I'm not in the British government anymore. So this is purely my own views and reflections. What happened at Bletchley was that, in the months coming after ChatGPT, there was a realization that This is a technology that's moving faster than any that we've encountered before, and that government needed to act differently to how it's responded to other challenges in technology. It needed to be much faster. It needed to get ahead of the problem, potentially some of the most extreme problems, the existential or the catastrophic risks. And so, in the short span of about 4 months, Rishi Sunak and the team that we had pulled together this global summit where we invited leading countries, leading companies working at the frontier of AI to sort of acknowledge that the risks were serious. We'd never seen this before, where the countries had acknowledged collectively that the risks were real and that we needed to take action on them together, that it was a shared problem for all of humanity. And so you saw that in terms of the US and China being on the same stage and signing the same documents, making these sorts of acknowledgements. That was an explicit aim for us to set the groundwork, set the norms that this is something that all of humanity had to face together, rather than independently, parcel off and try to, or just not make any progress on it all. So getting global agreement on the risks being real was important for us. And we were also really focused on building state capacity. So at the summit, we announced the creation of our AI Safety Institute. And we saw that many other countries as well have followed in that path. The United States has one, or a dozen other countries have one as well. There's an international network of AI safety institutes as well. Yeah, everyone on the stage, I suppose, has an AI safety institute in some form or another, which is really focused on the technical evaluation of the risks, right? If we don't understand what the risks are in a quantitative level, decision makers, senior political leaders are not going to be able to take the right actions. So we were really focused on just understand what the risks are. One, acknowledge that the risks are real. Two, do the technical work of measurement, of science to understand what the risks were, and then get the rest of the global community to take that forward. And sort of the third thing that we wanted is a forward process, right? You can have a one-off event to talk about safety, but we also wanted a forward process at the political level for talking about AI, and that's continued in this form in the summit series. And it's also continued in terms of an international scientific report. So not just building political consensus around what the risks are, but building the scientific understanding of the risks, again, with a much broader set of countries, including involvement from the UN, to mirroring what we've done in climate change. So across all of these things, it was about kickstarting a conversation that was not happening before at an international level, and that we were very worried would just never happen if there wasn't sort of a strong political impetus or a shock to the system to make people start talking about this.
Thanks. Interesting. So I'll come to you, Sunil. I know you weren't there at the summit, but your organization was. So, do let us know that, if it is impact and it is for public good, how does open systems work? And how do you think we can expect the private players for AI for social good and contributing in this summit for all the citizens?
Thank you so much, Shalini, for the question, and thanks to Carnegie for having me again. On the question of impact, and especially in the Indian context, I think we've already seen several examples. I won't go into what Nandan Nilekani talks about, which is the use cases. I'll stick to some of the scientific advancements that have been made. So what the team at Sarvam did is they looked at all the available proprietary and open models and realized that for Indic languages, we as Indians were paying a token tax. The tokenizer wasn't efficient enough. And in Llama, it was 6 times the efficient tokenizer that they developed was 6 times faster than our tokenizer and 4 times faster than the OpenAI tokenizer. So in OpenHathi, you can see core engineering contributions being made by the Sarvam team. AI for Bharat took another model of ours. Meta has a huge range of open source projects, more than 900 open source projects. Seamless for MT, and they trained it in 12 Indian languages, and now they have a much more performant text-to-speech and speech-to-text model called Indic Seamless. Unfortunately, Meta did not provide that model under a commercially compatible license, so it still can be used mostly by government and not by others. And most recently, we've been watching the expression of interest for indigenous models. And I think it is clear from the design of that EOI that they don't want to have derivative works from globally available open models. So we're going to watch the open winners a little more closely, and we're going to wonder how many of them are going to use PyTorch, which PyTorch is an open source project from Meta. And what's interesting about that open source project in particular is Meta became more radical on open source than any of the other big tech companies that I know. They took this crown jewel, if you may, and they donated it to Linux Foundation. So if somebody has a sovereignty anxiety, if they're using PyTorch, they need not have that anxiety because the copyright of the code and the trademark no longer belongs to Meta. It is handled by Linux Foundation. So I think there's a lot of impact happening. It's all invisible. I'll give one last example of Indian government policy. CSIR has an open access mandate. That means the $500 million that is spent by CSIR every year will produce open access journal articles or be published in faster moving sciences onto just archive. And that is $500 million worth of training data for all models. So open source lifts all boats, just like our projects helps everybody. The contribution that the Indian government makes of $500 million, just from CSIR, I'm not counting the other funding from the Indian government. That's $500 million worth of training data being contributed by the Indian government to the whole planet. So there's a lot of impact happening. We're just not sitting and doing the bean counting yet. I think some of us should start doing the bean counting and checking and quantizing this impact.
Yeah, I hope you are not being asked those things internally. Okay. So I think we have kind of, understood what we want out of the summit. And I'll come back to the audience in some time and kind of, take inputs to you. Secretary Sir is here, so, some inputs from the audience would also be welcome. Let's get into some fun. Let's do some rapid fire. And I'll start with you, Nitarshan. At the summit, something for all or a large-scale challenge which is contributed by all?
Could you clarify with that? Could you clarify what you meant by that? Like AI?
Is the summit going to be something for all?
Yes.
Or is it going to be a large-scale challenge contributed by all? What do you choose? You can choose one.
So if I understand what you're saying, right, like I think the way we did our summit in Bletchley Park was we had a very small set of people and countries and companies that were invited, which I think is a different approach to where the summits have gone for like various reasons. But we were focused again on like risks that were emerging at the frontier from a small set of companies, from a small set of countries. And in some ways that maybe mirrors other areas of historical technological challenges like nuclear weapons or climate change to some extent, where the responsibility maybe, or like the risk that's emerging comes from a small set of actors. So that made sense when the focus was on safety. And I'll leave it to the others to talk about the shifting focus to opportunity, but there, like, everyone wants the opportunity, everyone wants the upside of the summit. And so for the Indian summit, I suppose if the focus is on like impact, if the focus is on the broad distribution of benefits, then like having a broad set of people involved and like feeling like they have a stake in this conversation is going to be quite important. But for the safety conversation, maybe in some ways we want everyone to acknowledge that the risks are there, but it's the actions of a small set of people that's actually going to matter. A small set of companies, like on the order of 10 companies in the world currently today, that will affect what the safety issues look like for the next handful of years.
I'll come to you, Krishan sir. Do you think summit should be something for all, or we take one large-scale challenge which everybody contributes in, and you can choose one?
I choose something in between, I guess.
That's not the
Quite
option.
honestly, something for all is I think much as we would love to offer something for all, it may not work. But then, given the scale of challenges and everything, it can't be reduced to just one challenge. So probably, in a sense, it'll be more than one challenge, and thereby, everyone contributes and gets something out of it.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, just one other thing is I think whether people think Bletchley was a success or not, if one were to interpret it as a success, which I obviously do, it's because we had a clear focus, right? It was like we were really trying to make progress on a very narrow set of things rather than trying to solve every single problem that existed in the world around AI. And like, the problems of AI are as multifaceted as the problems of climate change or like the problem of global governance in general, right? And so that's like an almost intractable, infinite set of, or on like distribution of benefits. It still might, I mean, I'd love to hear others' views on this too, but it still feels like you need to pick like, 2 or 3 things that you want to make concrete progress on in those areas, which could be like the commercial deployment of data centers, right, for the rest of the world, and access of AI to the rest of the world in like some really measurable, concrete form, and then just like do as much as you can on that, rather than try to solve everything about global AI governance as a whole. But
Okay, good viewpoint. And the next question is for Sunil and Andre. 100 agents for all Indian citizens, or one large LLM for India?
Yeah, that's easy for me to answer because there is a official position on this from Mark Zuckerberg himself. So he doesn't want to stop at 100. He said, let 1 million flowers bloom. So that's the vision that he has for the world. He wants 1 million models. He doesn't want one ring to rule them all. He thinks that's some kind of dystopia, to have that kind of centralized control. So I wanted to go back into history and sort of go into the future that is already technically there, but perhaps not there because we haven't solved market incentives and some last sort of policy stumbling blocks. I go all the way back to 1440, the year 1440, and the city of Florence. The richest man, Cosimo Medici, was a lover of books. And he's 30 years old, and his book collection is just 8 books. And he grew up with 3 books. Today, we have a world where all the knowledge of the world could be offline in a 3 GB weight file or 1 GB weight file on a mobile phone of a villager in North Karnataka who does not have proper internet connectivity. And he can choose the novel of his choice, Munshi Premchand, and have it read to him in Kannada and in the voice of his favorite film actor, Dr. Rajkumar. So that's every single Indian with a mobile phone is potentially richer than Cosimo Medici in the 15th century. So that's the future that ideally we should build for, and that future won't happen if we put a limit of just 100 AI models and so on. That's why going closer to Mark's vision of million is a much more effective route than sticking to 100. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's a lot of information, and that's why I think the AI models are also moving towards reasoning, because the reasoning part is something which is the dearth of knowledge and the plethora of, like, there's so much information available that's not the bottleneck anymore. Andre, do you think and this is a question to you, do you think the summit should focus on economic impact of AI or citizens and their benefits with AI?
So, briefly, first, why do we need such summits, by the way? We need this because we are living an arms race. That's a race. Companies are racing, governments are racing. And in this context, if we don't have a common consensus on some principles, it becomes a race to the bottom. Because, for example, in Europe, we will be, you know this, we'll be very attached to human dignity, privacy, safety, maybe a bit more than the Valley, but if we adopt alone those principles, we destroy our industry. So we need the planet to be on the same line. And the unique, universal body is the UN. So whatever we do in our summits, we need to try to feed the UN processes, to strengthen the UN processes. That's why I feel that that's great if every year there is a meeting of head of states with a lot of researchers, civil society, companies, with a focus on some important point, because we have this global conversation and we put the light on an important point. And at the end, we join the UN process and we negotiate, even with people that don't think like us, and we negotiate. So that's important. So it does answer to your first question. It does answer a bit by the way, it depends of the priority of the hosting government. Doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, there is a global digital compact, there are negotiations, there will be the political body within the UN system, and we still have the GPIs that we did create together, etc. Very briefly regarding the question about 1 or 1,000 or 1 million, for us, and I feel that India will share this view, that of the utmost importance to be sure that at the center of this revolution, there is enough commonality, open source, common knowledge, science, and not just a privatized knowledge in 3 or 4 companies. We cannot afford a world with a domination of few models. It will ruin every value chain, because they would take control of every value chain. They will force a revenue sharing. So whatever happens, we will stand for the existence. I don't deny the interest of, if you want, of some proprietary model, but at the center, like in science, you could not find new patents without public science. You need public science to make patents. So, and that's why we did launch the current AI Foundation at the Paris Summit to have a vehicle to finance, not one more open source LLM. We don't need to. You have yours, but to help tactically where it is necessary. Maybe we need to develop new technology for secure access to health data, protecting privacy. Maybe we need some data sets. Maybe we need some tools. So it will be a contribution to the world of open knowledge regarding AI.
Yeah, I think you also brought a good point of consensus building for the public good, and then how we need to work towards that. So yeah, that's a very important point. I think you were also hinting to the wow, or I would say the investments which we can take for the summit, and I believe there were some investments announced, and Nitarshan pointed it to that the Safety Institute was announced, and at every summit there have been investments which have been announced or metrics being discussed. So let's talk a bit on that. Secretary Sir, how do you think you see the investments? Do you think investment announcement or metrics of the India mission is what should be shared in the summit, or are you thinking that this could be another place to get incentive investments decided on some common theme, and we should do the call out because it's like still 7 months away? So what's your take on the investments in this space?
I think there are 2 or 3 things on investments which are important. See, if you chase investment numbers for the sake of chasing investment numbers, you get announcements, they may not get implemented. So I think we should be a little wary on that. I've run investor summits, and where our focus is much more on conversion, saying, how many of what is announced and what is stated actually gets converted into on-ground investment. So from that perspective, this is all about impact. And I think it will be a good occasion to take stock, not just in India, but across the world, of what has happened so far in terms of impact, and what do we expect in the next stages in terms of what is it that we would see as real impact, and what would be the commitments made towards actually achieving the desired impact. I think that is the way you need to really look at it. And that would be really one of the areas that we would be seriously focusing on. The investments are an aside, because they just, a number gets thrown out. Then I've read very learned commentariat on trying to compare completely numbers which it's not even apples and oranges. It's not even comparing different types of fruits. They're comparing something else with something else altogether, saying this number is so big and this number is so small. I think that's not the way it is. The numbers and investments are very, very contextual and very specific to what they are meant to be. So I would caution against an approach which just focuses on that, and I would look at what we have done so far and what we aim to do next.
Okay. Andre, would you like to throw some light in terms of the Paris summit especially? the investments which were announced, and what has been the follow-through of them? How are they turning into, it was an action summit, how are they turning into tangible goals which people are doing, and where are they today?
Okay. First, I should take your point, and we didn't decide to invest because of the summit. We decided to invest because we want to have a seat on the driver's seat and not on the passenger seat. So that's our story and our industrial policy. But we decided to announce the investment during the summit. That was because we wanted to show that we believe in innovation, that we are not just speaking about regulation. Maybe that you cannot regulate if you don't innovate. That's an important thing. So we wanted to prove that we are making both. Maybe because I thought that you were preparing a question regarding innovation and regulation. So I did prepare an answer, but in one sentence. I think that regulation is not the enemy of innovation. And I want to ask to the room, can you, quote, tell me one innovation that was born in the Wild West? Was something important conceived, any innovation in the Far West, in the Wild West? No. Innovation needs science, policies, infrastructure, research, and needs some politics. So just that's a small contribution. Where we are, that's quite simple. President Macron did not announce a governmental investment. He did announce some private investments in the French economy, mostly in data center or infrastructure. So they are delivering because that's our private decision. President von der Leyen did announce 200 billion euros in European investment. We are working hard between the 27 to discuss, to prepare, but we are working. So because the negotiation started in Paris and is currently ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah, innovation needs a lot of politics, or some politics. That's a takeaway.
Maybe, of course, obviously, you can have bad regulation.
Yeah.
And you can make mistakes. You can also make bad investments. But I never read anywhere that investment was the enemy of innovation. That's.
Yeah. Thank you, Sunil. I'll come to you. There was a lot of discussion in the last 2 days that, and there are a lot of private players who are very keen to invest in the summit, and they're keen to run tracks, run use cases, challenges. So how do you see the investments, or for the public good, for the citizens of India during the summit?
Yeah, I'd like to sort of get to the monitoring and evaluation piece of the investment life cycle. And I've seen some analysis where the health of the Indian AI sector is measured by the number of patents that we have in AI. And there, I'd like to provide a small critique to that approach. If what we were evaluating were telecom technologies like 5G and so on, then counting the number of patents makes a lot of sense. Even if we ignored Prime Minister Modi's embrace of open source at Paris, and we said we're only going to do it proprietary. And even if we counted the patents for a proprietary AI ecosystem, that's the wrong measure, because the royalty that the patents earn is more important than the number of patents themselves, because you could just have a patent, but nobody is using your patent and nobody is licensing your patent. So I wanted to sort of connect this to how the Indian government could shape the market in a very significant way, and governments across the world do shape markets in a very straightforward manner through procurement policy and procurement behavior. India has, of course, a much more sophisticated approach to this, which is we invest in DPIs. DPIs are built on DPGs, or digital public goods. Open source AI is just another DPG, so that part is fine. But we could update the procurement approach as well. There is the old 2014 government policy for open source in government, if we updated that policy and either had a mandate for open source in certain places or a preference for open source in certain places or some kind of test for people in government to decide, should I go with open source in this use case or not? That would be an incredible way in which the procurement budgets of the government would shape the ecosystem, would incentivize open science. So Meta giving a small grant to IIT Jodhpur and funding a set of PhD students to produce research, that's always going to be outshined 1,000 times by what the government does. And that's why I'm hoping that the Indian government can continue on that path of DPIs and sort of look at its procurement of technology a little more closely and perhaps update the 2014 policy. Thank you.
Sure. So I think I'll have one last question before I open it up to the audience for questions. If you can just look at the AI summit as like 7 months run up, and then there is also post that time. What would, and I would go to Krishan sir, to you first, that what could be the Mangalyaan moment of India AI summit? And I'm not calling it DeepSeek for a reason.
Okay, now that's a tough one. I mean, I think to anticipate or to expect what would be that moment. But I think the one area in technology that India seems to have led in, as Sunil was just talking about, is creating DPIs. And if we are able to sort of intertwine AI with what happens in a DPI and either create a DPI which has AI also as one of the resources which is available and can be used more widely, that in a sense is a potential Mangalyaan moment. But if you ask me honestly, I wouldn't like to wait seven months for it.
Yes, the time is now, absolutely. So,
what we can predict is that probably something unattended will appear before your summit. Probably something we don't prepare.
Yeah, great. So I'll open it up to the audience now. Please feel free to raise your hands, and there'll be mics reaching you. And you can choose the question whom you have, or you can make it general. I think the first hand was raised at the center, yeah. And then we'll come to you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Krishnan, we are talking of future AI ahead, and our main manpower in agriculture, railway, and defense. How we are going to deal these three main manpower with AI inputs? Whether we will have a like drone or in agriculture, tractor are being AI driven. Same is in defense services. Do we are really prepared to input our AI in full swing, or just it will be slow type?
I think in each of these sectors, there are efforts on currently as to what would be the most effective deployment of AI. In agriculture, Krishi AI is already being applied. We are working with a range of stakeholders. The Agriculture Ministry is working intensely on it to actually look at range of data sets to figure out what better advice can be given to farmers, how you can actually leverage all this information, run it through a model, and then tell farmers and give them very specific advice related to where they are and how yields can go up. Similarly, our armed forces are also working on how AI can help them increase effectiveness. Likewise, in every other sector. So I think the work which is happening in this field is significant. And the other interesting thing is that even within government, I mean, forget about what is happening outside government, there's a lot of curiosity. But we did find that even within government, there's a lot of curiosity and willingness to learn about AI. On Karmayogi Bharat, the IGOT platform, which is the training platform, the most popular course is yoga at the workplace. And the second most popular course is AI. So most people have done. I think at last count, close to 1 million people had taken this course on AI at the workplace.
So there is reality. It's AI is, people say AI is hype, but yoga is reality. You better exercise and keep moving. We had a question here. Yes.
Thank you. There was a mention earlier in the discussion about the realization that AI actually also has an existential threat dimension. And the National Intelligence Council of the US, they actually have a kind of what they call the concept existential risk, and AI is one of them. My question actually is this here, that, if AI is such a thing that is being talked about, why there are different processes? G7 runs its own process. The Bletchley process started there. The UN Secretary General also has a panel on AI, and there was a global compact on AI. Is there a contradiction as to why different processes are necessary if the aim actually is to recognize or realize that AI, if it goes haywire, actually poses existential risk? That's my one question. The second one is that, I think Secretary talked about data center in India. Now, as one sees, it's coming out in the papers. One, of course, is because of global warming and India being impacted by that. So already there are predictions about the shortage of power supply. And data centers, wherever they're being set up, they are huge consumers of energy. And even the US, they're actually finding that it's not enough. So are we in a position today, or it becomes a vicious cycle, are we in a position today to actually meet that demand which the data centers will actually have? At the same time, the challenge of global warming, and considering the coal actually still our main source of energy generation, whether we are getting into a kind of a vicious cycle. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's take the first question first, and maybe Nitarshan, you can take it, because it was an evolution. The summit was an evolution, and maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah. In some senses there is a contradiction, but that's because people have different worldviews. And our worldview was one of extremely rapid AI progress being quite possible. This isn't even that outlier of a view. If you listen to company CEOs, all of them think that they'll have systems that are as capable as expert level humans on almost any task by the end of the decade. And so there's profound consequences to that. And it's not just about existential or catastrophic risk. Even if we manage those, society is going to transform in enormous ways. And it's a lot easier to coordinate and take action when you have a small set of actors, especially the ones that are maybe closest to the frontier, right? That are able to shape the direction of the technology. And maybe many others have different perspectives on how the technology will progress, and so they think that the existing processes, which can happen in parallel through the UN or other fora, slower moving processes that are consensus amongst a much broader set of actors, is an appropriate way to go. So there's a contradiction in worldviews, but it's fine that both of these things are happening simultaneously, right? They inform each other. At Bletchley, we launched a scientific report as well, chaired by Yoshua Bengio, and that included a much wider set of countries than the ones that were invited to Bletchley as well. And again, including the UN. So there's a sense of finding ways to get convergence between the rapid, opinionated processes and things that are more traditional, broad consensus-based processes as well. But my worldview is definitely we'll see extremely rapid progress, and so things are going to the existing systems I think are going to have to act much faster over the next 2 to 5 years as well.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Maybe I can add that your question is a very interesting and genuine question. So I will genuinely answer. The international order is not perfect, and by far and large. So today, as you did notice, there is no such thing as a world government. So we are quite 200 sovereign states, and we try to negotiate a bit. So if we decide that we want to forbid something, for example, I said yesterday, I think that we should ban AIs that can evolve alone and duplicate themselves. That would be a good security. Let's avoid to have a model that can self-evolve and modify. So we need to forbid to this company to do this. This company might be in the US, so we need the US administration to forbid this in their internal law. So we need them to sign a treaty, for example. But can you negotiate a treaty with China and the US and Russia and Europe? So that's long. And usually what diplomacy for other topics, nuclear, bioweapon, etc., first we need to frame a consensus, to frame even the debate, to build consensus on some solutions, to progress slowly, to find allies, to build coalitions. You cannot decide tomorrow this is forbidden. Because there is no world government, world police, and world justice. And that's what we decided after World War II, to respect the sovereignty of sovereign states.
Sure. Yeah. The second question, yes.
The second question on data centers, I think, again, a good question because it is a matter of concern. It's not a straightforward equation. And data centers, honestly, even before the AI thing came up, with cloud computing and everything else, there was a lot of pressure to add data centers. And initially, I am aware that there was a lot of resistance to setting up more because they guzzle a lot of power and they don't provide much employment at all. So there was always this feeling saying, why should we put up a data center where we are? But I think if you have to take advantage of this technology, it is something which needs to be done now. So which means we have to figure out ways of doing it. And India has an advantage in terms of having a lot of green power, but green power necessarily is not very firm power. So I think from where we had more data centers at locations along the coast where you have the submarine cables ending, you really need to move data centers to locations where power is available, particularly green power is available. And two, we have to figure out ways of storage of green power. I mean, that becomes very important. And three, I think, it can't be a 0 or 1 binary. That is, you're very green or you're not green at all. I think somewhere in between, because you see, one advantage with data center and the use of power for this purpose is that I think they can afford to pay premium rates. So if there are slightly more expensive solutions, including possibly using, to some extent, say, in certain cases, gas, because then gas is probably 60% cleaner than coal. So before you completely transition to other forms of storage, then at least, nighttime power or off-season power can come from gas and they can pay. So there are solutions, technological solutions which can be worked out, and my ministry is in consultation with the Ministry of Power and other ministries to try and address this issue. And an even bigger issue than this is also the infrastructure of, substations where it's available to connect up data centers and so on. So a number of issues need to get resolved. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a lady at the back. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Okay, great. Good evening. Thank you for an excellent panel. Lots to sort of take away and think about, especially in terms of public-private partnerships. Mr. Krishnan, my question is to you, sir. It was very encouraging, very affirming to hear you talk about collaboration and cooperation at the summit. And my question is just, we see a role for government, and I think we, to a large extent, see a role for the private sector. How can the civil society and, think tanks especially contribute to that conversation in the lead up to the summit, at the summit, in a way that is meaningful and can, form part of the solutions and the framework that comes out of the summit? Thank you.
I think, as I pointed out, we wanted it to be multi-stakeholder, so it's not just government and companies, but also civil society and academia. So we will clearly sort of make that space, and we will sort of set up mechanisms by which that consultation takes place. To be very honest, my ministry already does a lot of that. I mean, we are pretty open to, sometimes I feel that we're probably spending more time consulting than doing. But no, I mean, on a more serious note, I think we love to hear, and it's good to get the feedback on a range of issues. And since you mentioned civil society, let me make an appeal to you that, AI governance is something which has come up now, but very related and linked to that is internet governance, for instance, which is in a multi-stakeholder format. And the participation from the Indian side And in a multi-stakeholder format, the only way that you have more people in the room is by having multiple stakeholders representing a country like India. With 1 billion internet users, we hardly ever seem to find enough organizations in civil society, academia to represent. So probably there is a lot of space that you can actually take up, and presumably that will happen in AI governance as well. Thank you.
Very encouraging. So we have one lady here. First, yes. Yeah. And then we have one at the back. We'll take that, and then we'll come again.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Oh, it works. Good afternoon. My name is Shiko Gitao. I'm from Kenya. And my question should be quite obvious, right? This is the Global South AI Summit. Yeah? And I'm quite excited about it. In fact, I was in Paris when they announced that it's coming to India, and I was quite excited about it. And I'm feeling like all the questions are going to you. What are the actions you're going to take to have a more collaborative, inclusive summit that especially will touch on the Global South challenges? And I mean, not hating on the other summits. I mean, we talked about safety and action, but when you speak to Africans, what safety are we talking about when you don't have the fundamentals of AI? What action is being taken when some of the announcements actually left out the reality of our continent? 2 days ago we were saying, and even this morning we were talking, somebody saying the realities of India and Africa are pretty much similar. I always tell people, I was in India when I made up my mind about going back home. I was working for Google, excited about my life, but India convinced me to go back home and solve Africa's problems. So how is this summit going to have a significant moving of the needle in terms of impact on how the rest of the world perceives the Global South and its contribution, or its impact on the AI conversations and impact? Thank you. Oh, I have an offer. I had noted in my head. So part of that offer, I always say when I go to somebody with a challenge, I always say, what's the offer? I'm part of a group of people who are very bullish about what AI can do on the African continent. I'm willing to bring this group of people to support in building a working group for the African continent on this summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that offer, honestly, and I think we would love to have you and the group at the AI Impact Summit in early next year. I think that will make a significant difference. I think from India's side, I think our commitment to the Global South in terms of making sure that this happens for the Global South is very strong. Our Prime Minister made sure that the G20 was expanded to include the African Union. That's a key element which happened. The second aspect which I think is very important is that this year the G20 is being chaired by South Africa, and we are in close contact with them to push forward both the DPI agenda and now the AI plus DPI agenda. That's important from India's perspective, and we believe that it can make a significant difference for the Global South. And the Social Impact Fund was also announced, and we are working on it. And incidentally, I had an excellent interaction with senior civil servants from the Kenyan government a couple of months ago when they were here, and we were figuring out ways in which we could collaborate on the DPI story. But clearly in the Impact Summit, the intention is to demonstrate impact wherever it is, and in particular, and the impact needs to be in two ways: one in governance and what impact it can make, and the other in terms of the broader economy, in terms of economic impact on the real sectors, including things like agriculture. So we would love to engage further on this to make sure how we can bring a broader constituency of stakeholders into this. And each summit grows bigger, and our target, and no summit can grow bigger without participation from Africa in particular. And we would reach out and make sure through the Ministry of External Affairs and make sure that there's adequate, in fact, considerably more participation from the African continent.
Thank you. I'll take one last question because, you know, the time
Just
limit.
before I conclude, I may not have another chance to say this, but I just want to invite all present in this room to the summit next year because we might run out of time before.
Yeah, and thanks for being inclusive. And I think I have to be inclusive to the back side of the room. So just one last question from the gentleman in white shirt.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. And I really want to thank all the esteemed members of the panel for sort of charting out a very inspiring vision for impact. And just to sort of, I wonder if this is best posed to Secretary Krishnan or to Nitarshan, but the question goes something like this. And to extend Sunil's example of the villager that can use AI to listen to their favorite author in their language, there is also a flip side to that where a scammer could use the same model to clone the villager's daughter's voice and scam them out of money. And I wonder if impact defined thus can be approached from both a human flourishing point of view and also a human security point of view. The question for Secretary Krishnan would be something like, how can we make technical professionals in India who want to work on these problems, how can they get involved with India's AI mission? And to Nitarshan, it would be something like, what's the best way to research on these problems outside of frontier labs, which are generally more well-resourced?
Darshan, why don't you go ahead?
I'll almost steal the first question a bit, actually. So I mean, the way that we, and for that specific thing around like scamming or like crime, that's the sort of thing that the UK AI Security Institute also looks at in addition to catastrophic and existential risks. But the way that we set this up in the UK is that we created something that was treated as a crisis situation or an emergency situation. So we modeled the creation of the AI Safety Institute on the vaccines task force from COVID. And then we had this body, we brought in outsiders, including myself and people from venture capital, people from industry, and we had this body report directly to the Prime Minister. So it instantly became like a highly prestigious thing. The Prime Minister, like Rishi, spent time recruiting people, right? He spent minutes of his time like just talking to people and being like, you need to come join this thing. And we were able to convince people to leave DeepMind, to leave OpenAI. We had people who were going to go to Anthropic but chose to go to the AI Security Institute as well. So it was very prestigious. It wasn't competing on pay. It was competing on mission and public service, in a sense that like you would actually have impact because you were at the center of the power structure of the British government, and you knew you'd be taken seriously, and you were being given like exceptional civil servants to work alongside in like really like cohesive blended teams. So that was like really critical for the success of getting the right talent, people who could be making like tens of millions of dollars elsewhere to go into government, right? Extremely unusual in and of itself. And then giving them like the flexibility and the latitude to find the right problems and be empowered in pursuing them. And because the starting conditions were so good, that's why the AI Security Institute in the UK is like continuing to be a success. And I think those starting conditions are essential. Like if you don't have those, you're not going to be able to have the impact that you want.
Now, clearly, I mean, impact involves both positive and negative elements of impact, and therefore we have to address both. And safety of individuals, safety from being scammed by all of this is an important element of how we are addressing the whole cybersecurity question as well. Within the AI mission, there is a vertical which deals with safety, and we do call for proposals on an ongoing basis, and we receive many proposals, and clearly it's a very popular effort. So I think the next time that this is called for, and the AI Kosh, the portal has all of the details, and you should participate, or the institute that you're looking at should participate. In addition, there are also details of research and other projects on the safety aspect which have already been awarded. There are about 5 or 6 projects which have been awarded, and if you would like to contribute to one of those, it should be possible because those details are also up there. So, I mean, we are not in any way underplaying the risk, and we believe that awareness and knowledge about the technology is probably the greatest defense that you can have. And that's something which we work on as part of not just the AI mission, but part of the overall capacity building program that the ministry runs.
Sure, thanks. Responsible AI, governance in AI, they are definitely my favorite topics. But again, I'm reminded Saturday evening, so maybe We'll talk it again later. Let me summarize. Today we talked about the AI summit, which we are going to have in February, the theme being impact. Some of the key things which came up is, number one, we should not throttle the opportunity. We have to seize the opportunity. Inclusive for citizens of the Global South, so that all are included and are heard, and we jointly create a plan. Let the million flowers bloom, we heard that. And investments, which is conversion of investments and make things fruitful for the entire Global South. DPI to the power of AI, and that we should take the opportunity to make that happen. So those are the themes, takeaways for us. And I thank you, Secretary Sir, thank you, Sunil, thank you, Andre, thank you, Nitarshan, for being there and enlightening us on the way forward. Bye.
Thank you, dear panelists, for an inspiring and relevant session on the road ahead for India's AI Summit. No. Our next session is titled Powering AI, Sustainable Futures. Could the audience please settle down for the next session? For this session, I would like to welcome to the stage Urmi Tat, Manager, Public Policy and Government Affairs, Salesforce India, Vikas Kumar Singh, Vice President and India Head, Government Affairs, SAP, Mahavir Singhvi, Joint Secretary, Nest Division, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, Srinivas Varadarajan, Chief Executive Officer, Vigyan Labs. This session will be moderated by the Chief Coordinator for the GTS and a dear colleague, Shruti Sharma, Fellow Technology and Society Program, Carnegie India. Can I have the video, please?
Thank you, Sahib, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining this discussion today, and thank you for the great audience who's still patiently sitting here on a Saturday evening. We will make it real quick, and we promise that this discussion will be very exciting and informative. We have spent the last 2 days talking a lot about artificial intelligence, including AI infrastructure, compute, funding, India's AI mission, talk about AI and cybersecurity, and India's role in leading this space. But I think one thread of conversation that's still missing from the various conversations we have had over the last 2 days is about AI and sustainability, which is why we have this panel towards the end of our Global Technology Summit, just tying all the things together. So we just heard our previous panel talk about priorities for India's upcoming AI Summit. I think it would be good to discuss how sustainability features into that. But why is this discussion important at this point in time? It's because as artificial intelligence rapidly transforms industries, economies, and societies, it also brings with it a less critical dimension, its environmental footprint. From the energy consumed in training large language models to the carbon-intensive infrastructure powering AI systems, Sustainability must become a core principle in the way we innovate, govern, and scale AI. This session and the way it's going to be designed will be split into two halves, where the first half of the conversation will talk about how do you make AI innovations, AI applications more sustainable, but the other half of the discussion will also talk about how do you actually leverage AI for sustainability. With that, we are joined here today by Mr. Mahavir Singhvi, who will offer a more global policy perspective on how India can lead the sustainability conversations on AI. Vikas from SAP to explore the private sector's role in balancing innovation with our climate responsibility. Urmi with insights from Salesforce pioneering work on sustainable AI and how AI is already being used to support climate resilience on ground. And last but not the least, Srinivas Varadarajan to help us understand the technical and infrastructure level shifts like green cloud, edge computing, terms that I also need to know and learn a lot about. But with that, Urmi, let me start with you. The definition for responsible AI, also we heard this term during the last panel as Shalini wrapped up the last session. The definition for responsible AI is now evolving to also include sustainability, emphasizing not just ethical and fair use, but also energy efficient and environmentally conscious development. Salesforce is has been one of the few companies to roll out sustainable AI policy principles. Could you share insights on how your company is measuring and addressing the carbon footprint of its AI services?
Thank you, Shruti, and a very important conversation. I think the idea of encompassing sustainability into the definition of responsible AI comes from the inevitable truth about climate change. I think the statistics are quite self-explanatory. Data centers consume about 1.5% of power generation today, and by 2030 it's said to be 4.5, and some statistics even pose it to be much higher than that. And I think the risk that we end up running if the energy consumption compounds at this stage is a high level of inequality that might occur because of the kind of consumption and the dispersion of energy consumption around the globe. We've been on this sustainability journey for a decade now, and we really recognize that sustainability is one of our core values, along with innovation, along with customer success. And the way we really see climate change and addressing climate mitigation is through a multi-pronged approach, because addressing it is ultimately a multifaceted arena. So one of the ways we do this is by offsetting our own carbon footprint. So that could be in terms of buying carbon credits. It could be in terms of buying renewable energy certificates to offset the energy that our AI models use to train. And the other is, supporting ecopreneurs, people who are working at the very forefront of climate change, and to give them the tools like Agentforce and supporting through philanthropy to kind of help them to get the reach that they otherwise would not have done. And the other is through regulation and policy. So this is where the sustainable AI principles come in. This is where we try to engage with governments, to work with them, and in order to incorporate sustainability into policy frameworks themselves. And one of the ways we do that is by measuring impact. At the Paris summit, we unveiled the AI Energy Score. So this was a way of measuring power consumption, a benchmarking way of measuring power consumption of AI models. So we've declared that we will be we will have full disclosure under this model. So we will be disclosing our exact carbon footprint through this. So how it works is that there is a portal where developers can submit their AI models, and there is a benchmarking tool which then scores these AI models according to some very basic AI tasks like text generation, how much energy consumption is being used in text generation or image generation or summarization. And then the idea is to kind of come up with like an energy star for white goods, to have like a energy label for AI models. And of course, the key to success of any kind of standardization is adoption. And, and companies or governments kind of aligning on full disclosure. This is still something that is very close to us and we push for. And the idea behind all of this is that, if we're not thoughtful about our actions at this stage in terms of incorporating sustainability into the very design of AI models, it might be too late in the future to remedy this.
If I can push you a little bit more on this, where do you see the sustainability conversation going in the next 5 years?
I think there's a consciousness, especially among businesses, because there's a huge responsibility on big businesses because of their outreach, their access to capital, to do more in this space. It also is something that even makes business sense if you're able to see a long-term vision. So this is something that, it drives customer success, it brings customers, in the long run, it contributes to revenue. And it's just about popularizing that vision amongst companies and pushing all stakeholders to do this. I think otherwise the inevitability of what we're facing will be quite stark.
Great. I think it's a good segue for me to bring in Srinivas into the conversation. So Urmi did mention something about data centers taking a lot of energy consumption. She also mentioned how big businesses are thinking about measuring sustainability and how they're thinking about all the sustainability efforts more consciously. You've been part of Vigyan Labs, which is transitioning to like green data centers, or you're adopting newer and innovative ways to make AI innovation more sustainable. We have heard things like edge computing and the way it actually works to improve AI applications and make them more sustainable. So could you just unpack the term maybe edge computing for our audience, and also talk about why is it just the big businesses and why, and how do you even get the smaller businesses to think about sustainability from the very beginning?
Yeah, just to go back a little time, because when I just started designing Aadhaar, the whole infrastructure, right? It opened my eyes that IT infrastructure could be a massive guzzler of energy. So when I wrote the specs, I wanted a PUE of 1.2. All the vendors said, everybody in the world said it is impossible, right? And I spent some research of Aadhaar is over. It's a big problem. Nobody in the world had solved. Why can't we solve it, right? I saw that, I think last decade back, we saw that energy is going to be a big guzzler in the future data center world, AI world. And we were one of the pioneers who used AI to actually solve the energy problems. We started. And coming to Salesforce, right? I have some connection, deep connection with you guys. I built the first agentic AI and met Mrs. Arundhati at the time. I told her I can save 30 gigawatts of energy for you. And next few weeks, I got a call from her saying that, how can you help SBI? I think within 3 months, we went live. Till date, we have saved 100 gigawatt hours of energy for State Bank of India. That's what she saw the future sustainability. I think that was a big first point for us. That's where our sustainability energy started with Mrs. Arundhati at State Bank of India. And then we continued that journey to innovate continuously because we saw that, digital infrastructure globally, it's not just data center endpoint computing, the endpoints, the smartphones, the towers, together consume 6 to 7% of energy today, which will probably become 10 to 12% in the next 4 or 5 years. We started applying AI long back because turning off a light is easy. Turning off a computing resource is not easy, a lot more complex. So we had to use today we have agentic AI running about 5 million machines in the world, probably the biggest footprint of AI running in the world today. And the impact we have made is we have saved about 2 terawatt hours of energy just by using AI globally. And our research continued as we started saving. Customers came to us like SBI, can you save more, can you do more? And been continuously researching. And globally we look at, you look at the SDG goals, right? What are things? Land is a common issue. Water is the issue. Energy is the issue, right? Because still energy, Today, still large amount of energy is coal and oil. Energy is still a small percentage. We started looking at all these things, and after other, he started working on building data centers around the world for many countries, Philippines, Morocco, every country we went around. We started challenge. Getting land is a problem. Getting energy is a problem. Water was always a scarce resource. And sometime just before COVID, I thought, while we are innovating in AI, why can't we create a model data center in the world, which is completely run on solar? My goal was not to use water, run at a PUE of 1.2, cut down the energy consumption drastically. And we said, let's create a modular edge small data center, micro data center. We pioneered the concept of micro data center. We can make the footprint very, very small. It can run a massively workload. We did it, just a couple of years back. We built a green building, earthquake-proof building. We redesigned. I'm not a civil engineer, but learned everything. We built a building with 70% less cement. Use special construction material. The building is naturally cooled by 6 degrees centigrade, which reduces energy consumption by 30%. We removed all switches in the building, only sensors and AI. And we removed false roofings. Pretty much we eliminated, okay? Today, just to give an example, how much energy we have reduced, my goal was clearly not to consume more than what you can produce. We have a 60 kVA solar panel, rooftop building. How do you redesign everything so that you don't consume more than what you produce? On a sunny day in India, typically on a 60 kVA panel, you can produce about 300 to 350 kilowatts of energy. So we had to redesign everything, redesign the electrical panel, UPS, bus bars, everything in the system we had to redesign, including the servers part of it. Today, I'll just tell you, give a number, we do about 6 to 7 billion messages a day, month, slightly less than UPI. We have 5 petaflops of GPU, few hundred terabytes of RAM, then 10,000 plus virtual machines running. The total energy consumption is just 15 kilowatts. And our goal is that as we AI, and we have demonstrated that you can actually build a sustainable edge data center. Because the world is distributed, and country, I think, we talk about distributed energy, that when energy is distributed, why can't compute be distributed? And what you need is just a small piece of land. Sunlight is plenty in this country. You don't need water. And we create a model, say that we can create hundreds and thousands of distributed edge computing. It's highly sustainable. You don't need grid at all. You don't need water. Go into a place where there's a barren land, nothing grows. And that's what I see, where we can look at how do we replicate this around the world, make the AI highly, because we use AI. We are probably one of the pioneers. We use AI for everything, the electrical systems, the panels, the chillers, servers, every component has AI, agentic AI running. Because manually it's not possible to, do what we talk sustainability is humanly impossible to do controls. I think you need a control system which is AI.
What does it take to maybe include sustainability into any AI conversation or any AI innovation that happens in India? So how do you kind of integrate sustainability?
I think we need to have metrics, right? Metrics, right? How many, example, I use the metric, how many watts per token, right? Example, we just built a chat GPT one using the open source AI tool. We just, any of you can look at Mysore.ai with a low-end GPUs. We run it, the whole Mysore.ai LLMs run with less than 1 kV of power. And we started put a metric, one is PUE, mandate PUE, I think 1.2 is achievable. Mandate industry, the government mandates 1.2 PUE, reduce the water consumption, and let everybody benchmark by watts per token, right? I think we are able to do, I think, almost less than a milliwatt per token and keep reducing, right? And I think everybody is mandated to declare the carbon footprint of their AI infrastructure and benchmark, right? Watts per token, how many watts per token, then I think it will set the precedent for them.
Let me come to Mr. Singhvi. So we've just heard the two big players in the industry talk about AI and sustainability. Given your expertise and also your, since you're heading the next division here, Can India lead the global conversations on making AI more sustainable without compromising innovation and inclusivity?
Thank you, Shruti. Let me first thank you and Carnegie and Rudra for inviting me here in this interesting conversation on AI and sustainability. I think sustainability is important, very important. And in fact, what I feel is that you should have kept it earlier, because we should have talked sustainability first and the rest of the things should come later. But anyway, now we are talking
Sir,
about
I thought
it, and that's
people
very
would talk
important.
about sustainability
So,
naturally.
so I think it's very important in a way to have sustainable AI because as been pointed out by both the previous speakers, that AI is highly energy intensive in terms of power consumption. There are other resources like water, land, all these things are required. How do you make the optimal utilization of these resources so that we can make it really sustainable is the question. Now, before I go to how India can do it, whether India can do it, can India lead the conversation on sustainability in AI, I would like to give some facts. Perhaps most of you are aware of that, but just for your information, I was just going through a report by Goldman Sachs, and he said that a chat GPT query needs nearly 10 times more as much electricity to process as a Google search. So you can imagine the kind of power consumption which goes into just having a search or creating some sort of an answer on using your artificial intelligence platform. Similarly, I think there is another data which says that training ChatGPT took 14 weeks and around 42 gigawatt hours of electric power. And that's the equivalent to a Delhi electricity consumption of around 28,500 households in the developed world, or about 70,000 households in the poorer countries. And there is another statistics which says that to generate a 6-second video clip on an AI model, it requires 8 times more electricity than it takes to charge a mobile phone, or nearly twice that needed to charge a laptop. So all these facts, it points out the kind of intensity of energy which is required to run AI models. And therefore, it's very important to talk about sustainability in AI. AI, as you know, can solve a lot of problems pertaining to climate change or the energy efficiency and so on, but at the same time, it itself is an energy guzzler. So we need to strike a balance. Now, coming to your question, can India lead the conversation on AI? I think there are some distinct strengths which we have, and I think we have already shown that to the world, and we have been talking about it for quite a long time. And these, I would say there are 3 strengths particularly. One is the scale, the second is innovation, and third, I would say, that moral choice or the moral compass which we have. So let me explain all these things. When we talk about scale, we have 1.4 billion people. That is one of the largest, and digitally trained population which we have in our country. And we just don't consume the technology. We also test it. And we have shown it while, having technology platforms as DPI or Aadhaar or UPI or CoWIN. And all these, case studies have shown that how digital infrastructure can be inclusive, efficient, and at the same time sustainable. I think we can apply the same principles to AI. We can have a modular, low resource, open access platforms. That's where I think the sustainability would come in. So I think these are something we need to look at. So India has already shown the way forward, and we can certainly, lead the conversation on these aspects to have AI more, sustainable. These are the models which we can look at to provide guidance to us how we can go forward on this. Second is the innovation. I think you just spoke about how India is very apt in, and I think has provided a lot of frugal innovations, using low resources, using less power and less energy. You know, all these things are very important when we talk about this innovation. And these are, I think, very important because we need to have, you know, kind of deep seeking movement. Yesterday there was a lot of conversation on this. So I think these are certain things which perhaps give us some kind of a strength. We have a lot of startups which are working in this direction, and therefore I think we can provide, you know, sustainable model to develop AI as we go forward. Third is what I call is the India's moral compass and the moral choice which we have, and you know, the principles of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or even the life, you know, the mission, lifestyle, you know, this the Prime Minister's vision of the life mission. I think that's also again provide a kind of guidance to us as we go forward on this. We can push for ethical frameworks, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and at the same time environmental responsibility. So responsibility, when we talk about responsible AI, I think environmental sustainability is inbuilt in that. So those are the things I think we can certainly talk about when we, you know, look at leading conversations on AI. And if you look at the Paris AI Summit, the Prime Minister in his speech talked about making AI sustainable as we go forward. So I think we are already taking a lead on this. We have been talking about this at the various forums. We have been taking leads in the various kind of platforms globally, even G20, or in the Global Partnership on AI, the AI Action Summit. And I'm sure that in the going forward, when we host the summit, sustainability would be an important issue, particularly on AI. So that's, I think we are well positioned to lead conversation on sustainable AI in future.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think this is a good segue for me to get Vikas into the conversation to address some of the business AI applications. So I think Mr. Singhvi did point out, you know, how AI applications are consuming a lot of energy. We have heard about data centers, how they're consuming a lot of energy. So because addressing this energy consumption challenges of AI, especially for business applications, it requires innovation. Something which we also heard Srinivas talk about, but also adaptation and collaboration across government, academia, researchers, policymakers, industry, and the customers, right? My question to you would be how, because you're representing SAP, first question would be, how do you think the private sector can actually balance AI innovation and sustainability? And how do you interact with different stakeholders across the value chain to kind of enhance awareness around sustainability? And the reason I ask this question is India has put out a call to develop their own LLMs, right? So if we are actually in the beginning of that innovation curve, how do we make sure that we start building sustainable solutions from the very beginning?
Thank you. Thank you, Shruti, once again. Thank you, Carnegie, for this opportunity.
If you can just put your mic
Yeah. So thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Carnegie, for this opportunity. So I'll take a cue from what Urmi started off, what Mr. Srinivas said, and what Joint Secretary Mr. Singhvi talked about. So for now, actually, sustainability is no longer a fad or a trend word, basically. I mean, it's a global force that all of us are. It's a reality that all of us are living it day in, day out. Businesses can't be, you know, siloed or kind of be separate from this particular thought process. I mean, if you take the case of SAP, I mean, what Urmi just talked about, I mean, Salesforce, anybody else also, at least with the larger companies, I mean, let me assure you that for SAP, it's sustainability by design. It's an inbuilt process. I mean, there can't be anything that we do which is not sustainable, because it, I mean, as large companies, we do understand that whatever impact we create today is going to impact our business tomorrow, and we can't be ignorant of that particular fact. So it's a sustainable. And second is that what Mr. Singhvi said, or what Srinivas said, is that, you know, the same AI that we are today debating about its footprint is also the same AI which is helping you reduce those footprints. So that balance also will have to be there. So if I take you back a little bit into the technological history, I mean, it's almost, if you look at the the history of chips for that matter. I mean, how from large it came down, and today we are at, where we are now talking about GPUs and NVIDIA and everybody. I foresee something similar happening in this particular area also. AI, the AI today, which may be looking like not a very green thing to do, will be the same AI which will train us to become more green tomorrow. I mean, I, as a proponent of technology, I definitely am confident about that. So having said that, I said that you touched upon a very good point, Shruti, So at the core of everything, you should always remember that digital and sustainability has a very strategic linkage. I mean, you cannot talk about sustainability without bringing in a digital element onto that. Typical thing being, unless you know how are you going to improve, that insight actually comes in from the data that you have. AI cleans that data and does that insight generation much more faster, which then takes you to the whole the output of actually taking a decision, which is not just, bottom line oriented in finance terms, but also how much in green terms. Thankfully, research after research is now showing that being sustainable is actually a better financial decision also. I mean, so that part I'm just not going into that, but to reach that particular position, it is important that you collect the data, you crunch that data, and you get those insights that you're asking for, and AI actually does that. Coming back to company-specific, Shruti, so what we do is obviously, I mean, there are some low-hanging ones, which Srinivas talked about, how as a country we can do, or going in for renewable energy to run our data centers. What Urmi talked about, wherever we feel that we have not been able to meet those, balancing footprint, we actually go out and buy the certificates. So that, I mean, that's an option which is available in the market today. So we exercise that option wherever we want to do that. So those are the low-hanging ones. Typically from an operational perspective, things which are very, very simple and which Srini probably you'd like it, in a large company like SAP, we have already started monitoring, using the non-peak hours, those kind of things. So small things which add to that. End of the day, Shruti, I would like to really put this forth, a very basic fundamental. End of the day, energy is a cost for me, mind you. I am obliged to reduce that cost in case I want to do, a good job as far as my market capturing is concerned. One. Number two, the same data that we are generating. So already we are creating internal benchmarks, the way Urumi talked about. Internal benchmarks are being created as to how much of LLM, how much of energy, how should you really run that through to get the output. We are also calculating what is the net impact of creating that, running on that LLM output. Customer, what you talked about, very important, because when we actually deploy an SAP solution which has an embedded AI into that, we are actually calculating the usage of the customer also. So we are knowing that by producing something at X level of energy, usage was not, let's say, was only 50%, probably I need to rethink that, did I do a good job by spending X amount of energy to do something which was not utilized. So that capturing we are already doing, and retraining, always constantly retraining our model. So those are the kind of things that we are doing. Even at the customer end, we are actually, for us, which I'll come to probably the second part, we are now really propagating solutions which we call the green ledger or the SAP sustainability tower solutions and everything, which we are helping showing. And these are not just solutions which are into plant side, manufacturing side. We have solutions for CFO, how a CFO can be more green. We have solutions for a CHRO. How can a CHRO in his decision making be more green? How can the procurement team be more green in their solutions? And all those are actually embedded. So so coming back to your question, what we do, we are obviously tracking data centers that we have direct control on the energy consumption over there. We are tracking that and trying to improve that. Data centers which are not mine, we are very heavily dependent on hyperscalers. We are actually getting the data from them as well. So anything that we report has a scope 3 emission reporting inbuilt into that. So to that extent, we are even controlling that. Customer data also we are getting it. So we are trying to cover the entire value chain to figure out where the footprints lie and how we can improve that.
This is really helpful, and I think just going back to what Urmi said and just what you said now, the key takeaway that I'm taking from this conversation that it is easier, and I think the bigger companies have kind of, they are more aware of these sustainability issues. But as India is growing its AI innovation landscape, there will be some small and medium enterprises which will develop some foundational models, which will be developing more AI applications. How do you make sure that you involve those small and medium enterprises into this? And do you foresee any challenges for them? Because the way big businesses or big companies are, they're very structured, they have bigger teams, but not as many for the startups. So do you have like any advice or anything for startups that are in this space?
So one is that benchmarks are getting constantly created. Anybody who's doing that, I mean, obviously, thankfully, most of the compute is with Government of India, I mean, for those kind of people who are not really in a position to afford. So we are in a very healthy situation where the government being conscious of the sustainability and the climate goals and the climate obligations, I'm sure that part will be taken care of at the government level itself. So we really are not leaving it free for all kind of a thing. But second thing is, I would probably go back to Urmi. I would probably, I mean, while the SAP benchmarks are pretty internal at the moment, I'm not saying or putting words in Mr. Singhvi's mouth where we should try and come out with benchmarks and everything over there. But some standards definitely would help over here to people, for people to evaluate themselves. Again, an evolution which I'll go back to is the evolution of the BE star rating the way it happened. I mean, it was not very well accepted in the beginning. It has its own, people were not going for it. People were still going for cheaper options. But over a period of time, when people realized the return on investment and the cost-benefit analysis of going in for a 5-star at a slightly higher cost vis-a-vis a 3-star or a 2-star, probably that kind of maturity would definitely come in. Hand-holding, definitely yes, you should do it. I mean, because there is a huge involvement of academia, a huge involvement of researchers who, are struggling with their language models. Obviously, for them, it's more important to really come out with that big bang, something wow kind of a moment, not look at sustainability as the first focus. We have to make that into an inbuilt practice. For that, probably a collated approach where the government, benchmarks being created by us, so we can help sit together, create those benchmarks, get the institutions to come down onto that. The data center players themselves have a lot of role to play in ensuring that they have to do. And I know for sure, because prior to SAP, I also had a long stint with Lenovo, and we were constantly trying to move away from what Srinivas said, move away from lesser water consumption, move away into more energy efficient, stacks and everything. So those kind of things. So it will have to be a coalition of sorts, really, and not just an India coalition, but a global coalition of sorts, to really create those benchmarks and hope that people are working within those guardrails or parameters where we are doing. So that's my, foresight on this.
No, that's super helpful. Urmi, do you want to comment on anything?
No, I completely concur. I mean, as you said, there's this, there's the big businesses which definitely make, they know that this makes revenue sense for them in the long term. They know that this is something that attracts customers for them. As maturity on this issue develops, you're kind of judging your own benefit in terms of energy consumption and what you're saving and cost savings in order to select the model that works for you. And I think with small and medium businesses, they do require a level of support to also, come to the same level as bigger companies. In one of our sustainable AI principles, we have advocated also for financial support. This could be maybe in the form of tax breaks or incentives that actually allow companies to come to the same level when it comes to using sustainability. Perhaps this is something that they want to do, but it doesn't, long-termism isn't something that is ingrained when you start a business, and it does need a bit of hand-holding there in order to achieve the goals that, that bigger players can do. So I think this is one of the things that perhaps we can discuss further.
Sure.
So just add to that, There are a couple of researchers here, but I would like to use this platform. You know, what will happen is the market will also, determine this. In our case, my customer, I mean, it's not just giving an AI-based embedded solution. The customer has to then, end of the day, do the ROI at their end also. Is that how much of hardware requirement, how much of energy consumption is happening at their end to get that benefit that I may have probably gone and sold ahead. So the customer himself or herself is also doing that analysis all the time. The market will also do that analysis, but yes, I mean, whether the startups and the young researchers, when they reach that stage, probably that's a question I don't have an answer at the moment, but probably we can look.
No, I totally agree to that, and I think it would also need a lot of awareness among customers to kind of calculate that energy consumption in their end. But Srinivas, let me bring you in back into this conversation. So the general consensus around the panel seems to be that it is not a one-person job. We need to have different stakeholders together to kind of, the government, policy, industry, academia. What is your opinion and how do you envision AI sustainability to be embedded across the AI value chain? We have heard from both Urmi and Vikas, but do you have any other additions?
Yeah, I think sort of concur with them. It's a general consensus among the team here. The only one thing I think I change our stance, because India, finally it's kitna milti hai, standard goes up. So we have converted AI to actually in terms of reduction in the cost, operational costs. That number speak for itself. So when you just talk about cloud or a private cloud, a data center, you talk to customers about reducing your operational expenses, because one of the biggest costs of running a data center, example is IT, is your energy. People don't have metrics. Today people traditionally India run at 1.5, 1.6 PUE. When you just show them you can run to 1.2 PUE, you're going to save a huge amount of money. Just to give a thumb rule, right? A capex cost of a data center versus OpEx. In 5 years, your OpEx is equal to capex. So we have been able to cut by capex by almost OpEx by more than 50%, and capex also significantly less because we use a different technique. So cost saving is everybody looks for. I think when you translate your sustainability into a financial metric, and people readily accept that. And that's what I've seen. When you talk to CFOs, I say, I cut your cost by 50%. Nobody says no, right? By the same time, you're sustainable. So I just started using the word profitable sustainability. It's like help your planet, help yourself. And that's a story that seems to work everywhere. Yeah.
That's a nice way to put it, profitable sustainability. But let me come back to you, Mr. Singhvi. So we've just heard the panel talk about collaborative approach. We've heard about profitable sustainability. How, according to you, can policymakers, industry leaders, researchers implement strategies to ensure AI development that aligns with global climate goals?
This is a very, I think, good term which he has used, profitable sustainability. I don't know. But I think that makes sense actually, because at the end of it, everybody has to, win. There should be a win-win situation for everyone. And that's very important, particularly in terms of sustainability. When we talk about how can we align with the climate goals, I think, as all of them have pointed out, for the policymakers, it's important that they provide some guidance, some sort of benchmarks, some sort of standards or so to follow up by everyone. I think that perhaps may be a guideline to start with, to make, to examine themselves whether they are meeting those or not. And I think that is something very important. I don't want to prescribe here anything, but that's my personal view. I think that standardization at the end of it helps to a great extent in terms of, going forward, particularly on the sustainability aspect. Similarly, I think he talked about greening the data center. And I think if you look at the draft data center policy also, which was framed some time back, that also talked about green data center. And some of the state governments in their data center policy to attract investment, they have mentioned about issues pertaining to sustainability apart from other, the kind of facilities or the incentives they are giving to attract investment for the data centers. I think at the international level, I think there is a need to integrate AI policy into the climate governance also. So whenever we are talking about climate governance, issues at any forum for that matter, I think now AI sustainability should also become a part of that. And that's very important because AI is going to be there forever and as in the near future or in the distant future as I can see it. So I think we need to have some sort of discussions on all these forums where, you know, climate negotiations or climate discussions are happening. So that would give some sort of, you know, kind of attention to this issue of AI sustainability and a sustainable AI as we go forward. We also need to strengthen global cooperation on this. We have been doing it ourselves, and as we, you know, I think perhaps in the previous session also, perhaps Secretary Master told that we would be hosting the next AI summit, and we look at this issue particularly, you know, very closely in that summit, and we'll see that as we go forward, more and more discussions happens on this, and that's very important to bring some sort of you know, attention to this issue. And this is a responsibility at the end of it for everyone. You know, everyone should recognize that whenever you are using AI, you are somewhere contributing to the, you know, maybe emissions at some level. So I think you need to be frugal in your approach. You need to be responsible in your approach, how much AI you need to use, so that you are also, you can also contribute to the, you know, maybe climate, you know, the challenges which we face. So I think these are some important things we need to keep in mind. So that's what I want to say.
I think the upcoming India's AI Impact Summit is a good way to start the benchmark conversation, something that is born out of this conversation as a policy impact, just putting it out there. But I think we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we've talked a lot about how do you make AI innovations more sustainable, but let us talk about how is AI actually helping achieve sustainable development goals. So let me turn to you, Bikas, again. How do you think and what is AI for sustainability, and how can the private sector and government use AI to meet their climate commitments?
Sure. Thank you, Shruti. So, I mean, as Srinivas also pointed out, you know, the same AI has a huge role to play. I'll come back to my first point that I said, that there is this very, very deep strategic linkage between digital and sustainability. So the data that you are collecting at every stage of doing business, right, and from your supplier, from their sub-suppliers, to the whole supply chain, procurement, manufacturing, packaging, logistics, every point you are generating data. And that data that you are capturing is actually capturing the footprint that you are accruing at each and every stage. So basically, in a very simple term in SAP, we call that you record, then you, you know, kind of report, and then you take action on basis of that. So CEOs, and as I told you, that sustainability is no longer, you know, some kind of a trend. It's actually a global force. Every business is conscious. It is adding to their bottom line. That part is also well established. So, so that data which you need to really take that decision to go sustainable or go green, or howsoever you want to say that, that can come only, and it's a huge amount of data. You can get that data and use that efficiently to process that data. You need AI. To give the insights out of that data, after that processing, you again need that AI. And the same AI has to constantly keep improving on itself to give you a better insight next time. So that's exactly what's happening on business AI side. That's exactly where SAP solutions, which are already embedded with AI now, are actually throwing open. In our terms, we have something called a green ledger, where we say that the same ERP that is giving you financial data is also giving you green data. We have something called sustainability towers that we call, those are the terms, but probably I'm sure Urmi would have something similar, and Sini does that day in, day out. So that's where it is. I mean, the same AI, and for government also, in governance, I mean, how you're running large citizen-centric programs, you need to constantly crunch that data to improve on that data. So, for example, state of Andhra Pradesh runs on SAP. We have something called Comprehensive Financial Management System, Now that large data which was lying in silos, guzzling energy, everything has now been coordinated by the state government. And now at a drop of a hat, if I may compare the Chief Minister as a CEO, every morning he has insights on where his revenue is going to come from, where does his projects lying and everything. So, and that is actually, so project delays where they are happening, what's happening in the health sector. So there are multiple use cases, as I may say, once you get the data right, clean that data right, apply AI on that data and start getting insights. So it is not just for businesses. I mean we have e-commerce who are using that for their logistics. We have, groceries who are using it to reduce their wastage. It can be multiple. I mean, use cases can be multiple. So definitely has a huge play. It's one of the largest, best doing business arms of SAP also, by the way, in case that is an indication how important businesses are taking this actually.
Great. I think, Urmi, if you would also like to give us a sense of, some use cases of how AI is actually being used for sustainability and to improve sustainability.
Sure. As Vikas said, using, greening AI and using AI for green are sort of two sides of the same coin. There are, lots of interesting use cases where we're trying to use agentic AI in order to deliver real-world solutions. So one is, there's this startup called Good 360, which is using agentics to sort of optimize disaster relief delivery. So it kind of tracks the routes and patterns that all their delivery trucks take in order to deliver foreign aid more efficiently and optimize those traffic routes. So that saves energy, that saves cost. So that's one good example. The other is we're also working with the government of Andhra Pradesh, with Producers Trust, in order to use predictive farming, use agentics for predictive farming. So farming can sometimes be a very unsustainable exercise, around, lots of data, 70% of water consumption comes from a farming sector. I think 40% of the produce also goes to waste at times. And what we're trying to do is to use agentics to connect buyers to sellers in a more appropriate manner, so there's a greater efficiency. We're trying to deliver instructions in vernacular, and also to align cropping patterns according to the weather, according to local conditions. And you know how agentics works here is that instead of using one LLM across the board, the data is sort of broken up into these smaller packets and then assigned to specific models to accomplish specific tasks. And that's a very energy efficient way of delivering these kind of services instead of using a larger language model to do so and having its energy wastage. And there's also several startups in the space who are really using AI for good. There's, I think it's Fano AI, which is this startup that uses deep learning to predict patterns for wildfires even before they occur. So it's very, in terms of disaster relief delivery as well as disaster prediction, I think these are some of the areas where we can see widespread usage, and these are scalable as well. So something that can be used, that's something that we see, in the US can also be modified to local conditions and local context, and the solution can also be applied to India as well, and maybe from India to different countries as well. So it's a way of kind of connecting the world through AI for good.
That's quite optimistic, and we're left with about 7 to 8 minutes. I would like to bring my audience into this conversation. So if any of you have questions, please raise your hand. Can we have the mic, please? Please introduce yourself and keep your questions brief. We'll take a set of 3 questions maybe at a time.
Hi, I'm Deepak Maheshwari with the Center for Social and Economic Progress. So number one point is that sustainability is way beyond just energy. Energy is important, but energy is not the only thing. So we should look at materials and other stuff also. That's one aspect, which somehow was not discussed today. Second thing is you mentioned about the suggestion for the Impact Summit. So I think there we should talk about impact of and on sustainability, both ways. And the third thing I just wanted to suggest was that while we are talking more from a technology ecosystem perspective right now, it would be nice, perhaps in future, or even now, to engage with Ministry of Power or Ministry of Environment, MOE, FCC, etc. So what are their policies talking? Are they talking about using of AI in their respective policies? Because it takes two to tango. Thank you.
Great. Can we just have the mic?
Thank you. My name is Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador. My question is basically, there are two questions I have. One is that we also in the previous session heard about the data centers and what kind of a demand they make on the energy requirement, which is huge. Even for the US, one reads about these things, that even they find it very difficult to cope with the rapidly growing demand for this. And we heard also just in this panel about the micro data centers. So I'm wondering, between the two of them, micro data center and data centers, I mean, how is the modeling to be developed as far as we are concerned in terms of, scaling up our LLM and all those kind of things that we've been talking about? That is one question. The other question is to Ms. Urmi Dutt. And, you talked about the agentic, the predictive farming. And that is linked to, climate change. Now, climate change, as one sees at the moment, actually its localized impacts are highly unpredictable. So what kind of modeling you're developing in a situation which actually by itself intrinsically unpredictable? I mean, that's what kind of exercise this actually entails. Thank you.
Okay. Can we have the mic, please?
Hello, everyone. Vikrant, this side from EY. So my question to you is regarding that, as Mahavir Singhviji said, sustainable is win-win for all. So the thing is, whatever we are putting it in terms of resource allocation, whether it's coal for energy, whether it's all rare earth mineral for making semiconductors, which is powering AI, and then we supply or fit these semiconductor in data centers, and so much amount of money has been putting into this. So how do you see this trade-off as this now? Is it going to get paid off? One question. And if it is going to pay off, when it is going to be done? Or we just have to wait and see approach. So just to draw an analogy, almost 5 years ago when 5G was being developed, and there are many reports you can see right now in vendor ecosystem that 5G will bring in so much amount of money and all. We are in 2025, we do not see 5G a lot all over the world.
Okay. Would someone like to take the first crack at the first question, the micro data centers and?
Okay, talk about, two things, right? One of the important things, what we try to do micro data center is, okay, look at today is how to minimize the footprint, because what is important for running data center is land, water and energy. Okay, so our concept of micro data center was to minimize the footprint. Because one of the biggest challenges in data center is about energy and heat. If you can, so we try to eliminate, some of these aspects. Micro doesn't mean you cannot run very workloads. See, there are a few cases everybody in the world does not have to run training. Majority will do inferencing, right? Inferencing doesn't require a massive amount of infrastructure. A micro data center, I would say, you can have about 50 to 100 racks. You can do in a quarter acre of land. It's completely solar powered. You don't need water. And as a country as such, India is a high density of population, and we have so much of diversity. Sorry?
Can we do without data centers?
See, we need computing power somewhere. Okay, computing power somewhere. Data center could be, we just coined the concept of a data center, micro, nano, and pico. A pico could be one rack itself. We're able to run, one of the customers, I said, one fairly large language model, we're able to run a rack, about 2 kilowatt of power. So, as a country of diverse us, we need, different conditions, different languages, culture. A distributed model is the way to go. We need a large central model for certain things, but for our regional, we are a country of 1,000 districts, thousands of villages and taluks. a small taluk can do with a one rack, that's it, you know. They're self-cooled, solar-powered, you don't need any energy from the grid. It automatically can be autonomous, AI-driven, and that's probably one of the way to go in this country.
Urmi?
Thank you so much for your question. I would definitely add that anything that is predictive is never 100% the word of God. And what we can basically do is to make it as accurate as possible, pulling it from making data sources as integrative as possible in order to give you the most accurate results. Currently, there are schemes running, for example, I think there's predictive farming practices that some universities are attached to. They do send the most accurate data that they can to farmers in order to influence their cropping patterns. So what our technology does is make that a lot more accurate by creating these data sets, pulling together different data sets and making the process a lot more integrative. So it's about giving you better tools, incrementally improving the kind of technology that you have.
So I'll just add to that. I'm not an expert on the agri side, which Urmi talked about, sir. But in case I can give you an example from business AI side of it. So a very simple example, which will probably put things into perspective. These local data sets are also important and getting inbuilt into that. So if an AI solution that SAP may have for, let's say, the steel sector would not be the same that we would have, say, for confectionery sector. Because those set of data which are unique to confectionery will be utilized over there. The ones which are unique to steel. So there is an element of small building blocks actually coming up. You can probably restrict that. I fully agree with you that, probably, and why us, the whole Indian Meteorological Department is actually, their prediction is going for a 6 because of very localized this thing. So, I mean, you have a point definitely over there, but that's how probably it's getting built up. And it's a work in progress. It's never one day.
Srinivas, quickly, last question.
Yeah. Next question, I think somebody asked about ROI data center, just like 5G and 4G. What I've seen, you look at today, unfortunately, a lot of data center people think it's a real estate play. You build large ones. Historically, data center people, the ROI has been 7 to 8 years, unfortunately so. Except the hyperscalers, nobody had made money. So we looked at reinventing data centers, micro data centers, the ROI is just 2 years. You don't need massive one. You can build a micro and modular one, 2 years with ROI, because your operational costs are significantly lower. You run on solar powered. You don't use water. So we have seen ROI of just 2 years for a micro data center.
Thank you, and I think we're right on time. Thank you so much, everyone, for this engaging and insightful conversation, and thank you to the audience for patiently listening to us. Thank you.
Could I ask the audience to please settle down? Thank you, dear panelists, for a forward-thinking and important conversation on a sustainable future for artificial intelligence. Now, for the final panel of this year's Global Technology Summit, we present our marquee session, Sambhavna. Next is what? For this session, we have an eminent set of panelists. I would like to welcome to the stage Ambassador Philip Ackermann, Ambassador of Germany to India and Bhutan, Ambassador Philip Green, Australia's High Commissioner India, Evan Feigenbaum, Vice President for Studies, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Ashok Malik, Partner, the Asia Group, Rosa Balfour, Director, Carnegie Europe, Tanvi Madan, Senior Fellow, Center for Asia Policy Studies, the Brookings Institution. This panel will be moderated by James Crabtree, Distinguished Visiting Fellow, European Council on Foreign Relations. Can we have the video, please? James, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James Crabtree. This is the last panel of an excellent two-day summit, so I'd invite you all to give my panelists a round of applause to make sure that Very good. We appreciate you coming with full energy to the final panel, which will bring this event to a rousing conclusion. We're thinking about the future. We're going to focus mostly on geopolitics. The essay question that I've given my panelists is to think about the next year, all of the topics that we've talked about in the summit, where exactly are we going to go, and we're going to dive straight into it. And I'm going to start with Evan. Evan, you've just flown in from the United States. To be honest, most of the mood music around this conference has involved your government as opposed to the Indian government and what it's been up to. Tell us, how much worse can this get?
Does it involve my government or involves my president?
Your government.
The president. Okay, so the first thing to say, the president of the United States tends to suck the oxygen out of almost every conversation. And that's no different in Washington. He sucks the oxygen out of a lot of things because the administration and the political landscape is very much driven by his personality, but also by his inclinations. I mean, I was a Republican political appointee. I worked for George W. Bush, and the party on some of its positions is broadly unrecognizable, right? I was on a panel this morning. We talked about tariffs. We talked about trade. Went from being a pro-trade party to anti-trade party, pro-business party to slightly anti-competition party. Suddenly we're talking about price controls. So the president's personality drives a lot of the discussion, and so do his policy inclinations. That's a challenge, because I grew up in New York City, where we have something called alternate side of the street parking, where on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can be on the left side, and on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you can be on the other side. And the president doesn't always know where he's positioned. He changes a lot, as he has on tariffs. I think, since the theme of the panel is geopolitics, I would just say, I think, notwithstanding all of that, the United States is at an inflection point, globally and geopolitically, in any case, because the major conditions that underpin primacy, which we like to flatter ourselves that we still have some kind of primacy, much less hegemony, are either eroding or have eroded. One is being a safe haven financially, economically, commercially. And if you look what's been happening in the markets for the last several days, there's a broad, as we were discussing on a panel this morning, moderated by Ambassador Singh, who I see here, there's been a broad liquidation of US assets in the last few days in ways that cut at this question of safe haven, because it's not just risk assets, but it's safe assets that are trading in some ways as if they're risk assets. And that raises some fundamental questions about where the United States is heading, particularly in the fixed income and the bond market. Second, and most importantly, is the willingness to provide public goods. And to see public goods is something that you provide internationally, partly because it's self-interested to do so, but partly because that's the price you pay for primacy. And what I've seen happening structurally, but particularly in this administration, is that economic public goods, being the demand, keeping the market open, sharing technology, thinking in terms of techno-globalism, not just techno-nationalism, the things that made the United States both attractive and a power are eroding in the policy landscape, but also in the public. And in this region, where the United States was the demand that export-led economies relied on to power their way to prosperity, the whole landscape is different. And then the last thing is that powers like that don't conflate power and influence. They know that they're different. Just because you have power doesn't mean you have influence, and that's underpinned by credibility. And the United States, over the last few years, even in the last administration, is increasingly having to coerce compliance from its allies on things like tech controls on China, transfer of certain things. Why? Because not everybody's on the same page. And the challenge with this administration is it's using power in a way that sees every problem as a nail, US policy as a hammer, and the US is losing credibility as a result. And so as that plays out over 4 years, I think it's really an inflection point in, as you implied, the way others think about the United States, but also, frankly, the way the United States sees itself internationally. Because if you're not willing to provide public goods, then you're not willing to pay the price of primacy, and that's essentially where the US is heading.
Okay, so Ashok, you heard from Evan that, in a sense, the US, in a sense, the US order is crumbling. We began this summit 2 days ago with a introduction from External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, he seemed, I wouldn't want to say relaxed, but sanguine about the challenges that this presented. And out there in the rest of the world, there are a lot of people who don't seem to be as relaxed as people are here in India. So tell us about that. Why, I mean, India seems reasonably sanguine about these epochal changes. What opportunities does India see, and how is it being responded to?
I don't know whether India is sanguine, it's just being realistic. You know, Washington is a very seductive city. If you're in the establishment in Washington, you think it's the capital of global power. If you're in the non-establishment, you think Washington is the capital of global dissent. In India, we just think Washington is the capital of the United States. And we deal with the government and the president of the day. Now, this president has made trade, tariffs, and reshaping the contours of economic engagement a very important part of his agenda. To be sure, there are different views on how that reshaping will take place even within this administration, between the MAGA group, which sees tariffs as more long-term. It's almost theological about tariffs. And the Wall Street and tech crowd, which is more transactional and short-termist on tariffs. We don't know which side will eventually prevail, or if either side will prevail. Frankly, it might just suit the president to play one side off against the other and ask his interlocutors, including India, to give him the best deal. And he'll pick the best deal when it suits him, and he won't when it doesn't. In all of this, spaces are being opened up in the international system, in the global order, in the trading order, and in broader geopolitics. Some of those spaces which are being opened up are a challenge and a concern. Some of those spaces are opportunistic, and some, frankly, are areas we can use, which is why India's approaching the Trump moment, and the coming year at least, with great realism and hopefully agility.
Tanvi, same question to you. India's response to this Trump moment is appropriately chilled or sanguine?
I agree with Ashok in the sense that, you know, it might seem that it's chill. Some of this is relative, that maybe there's a lot of other panic elsewhere, or, you know, a different reaction at least. I think there are a few reasons why I think India is taking the approach it is. For one, I think there was perhaps a greater degree of expectation, perhaps, or preparation that there would be another Trump term. There wasn't necessarily kind of this view that there wasn't going to be he was going to be a one-term president. So I think there was preparation for that, including in terms of what potentially a second Trump term would bring. I think the second reality is that, all said and done, the US is crucial to several Indian objectives. And Prime Minister Modi said it's an indispensable partner to every one of India's objectives: security, economic transformation, technological acquisition. And so the reality is that whoever is the president, as Ashok said, the reality of the US being important for India hasn't gone away. And so I think what you've seen, and you saw the contours of this in the first Trump term, but you're seeing it, I think, even more now, an approach that has involved invest, adapt, insulate, which is in continuing to invest in alignment with the US where possible, adapting to the new realities of a second-term Trump, with the only constant in the next 4 years going to be volatility. And then third, to some degree, try to insulate India from kind of the headwinds that might come through continuing to invest in building Indian autonomy, continuing to diversify and perhaps speed up diversification of India's partnerships with Europe, with Australia, with Japan, with others, with Russia as well, and maintaining that relationship. And then finally, I think with stabilizing the relationship with China.
I'll come on to China in a minute, but we're looking in this panel forward to what's coming next. One of the things that's happening is we might get a Trump visit to China in the middle of the year, but also we're almost certainly going to get a Trump visit here in India because of the Quad Summit. And so, Philip, let me turn to you as a Quad member. What can we expect from this Quad Summit? And if I might ask a sort of slightly sharper question, under President Trump, one can surmise that he would like to have a slightly harder-edged defense and security-focused Quad neither India nor Australia have been terribly keen on this idea. So talk to us about the future direction of the Quad as well as what we might expect when President Trump turns up in Delhi later in the year.
Firstly, about the current moment we're in, and by the way, it's a moment where Australia is in the middle of an election campaign, so I'm going to be a little more cautioned about what I would say.
I should say this is being carried live, this debate, so whatever the ambassador says will immediately go straight home. So.
There's a new figure of speech in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra, which is operating at the speed of relevance. And we are at a moment where being able to perceive what is going on, interpret it, analyze it, engage on it, and find responses to it at a level of quickness that has not been required at any time during my career. Look, I just want to say something about some of what the others have said. Look, Mr. Trump won the election on a mandate for change. So none of us should be surprised that change is coming at Washington and that we will have to adapt to it. You know, that's a reality of politics. I think what we are learning or being reminded of is just how salient the United States is in global affairs. Sometimes when I hear people talking about multipolarity, they talk as though there's a group of global powers that are more or less equal. That's not true. The United States is still at the apex of the global order. Australia understands that, India understands that, and that explains a lot of our responses. On the Quad, you know, we're looking forward to the second Trump term. It was under the first Trump term that the Quad began its second journey. Since then, and I was the Quad Sherpa at that point, and I can tell you a vast amount has changed. You know, in those days, the Quad was seeking to become the Quad, in effect. We were meeting at senior officials levels on the sidelines of other meetings, sometimes not putting out a statement, occasionally a few lines. Now we have summits, we have foreign ministers' meetings, we have working groups, we have a whole range of activity going forward. So the Quad has really matured in a very important way. I think what we can be sure is that all members of the Quad are now keen to make it even more effective. It is now well established. It now has a positive framework. We've had, on the very day of the inauguration of the Trump administration, a clear signal that the Quad is very important in the foreign ministers' meeting. But I think what we're all looking for now is to make it even more effective.
Let me turn to my two European co-panelists. Ambassador Ackerman, during this event, my colleague at the European Council on Foreign Relations, Janko Ortel, had a back and forth with Piyush Goyal in which he stated that he thought Europe was currently in crisis. He was referring partly to trade negotiations and non-tariff barriers and environmental regulations, but he was making a broader point. I wondered, before we get into the substance of Europe-India relations, if you might like to respond to that and in a sense, give a sense of where you see the Europe-India relationship.
So let me start by saying that we know the Honourable Minister of Commerce very well. He is a friend of a good debate and is in front of the camera. He can be very, very, let's say, argumentative. You know, I mean, that's maybe the word that comes to mind. I would respectfully disagree. I think Europe
you don't have to be too respectful.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm ambassador in India. I better respectfully disagree. So I would say that Europe is, I mean, undergoing we have some difficulties where basically not alone. You see the rest of the world, including the United States of America, having a couple of difficulties, so that's the reality. But I think when you look at what happened in the last weeks, Europe has shown in a remarkable moment of strength. And I would say that the visit of the President of the Commission and 21 commissioners to Delhi 5 weeks ago was one of these remarkable events where the Commission has shown that, you know, they shift their attention very much towards India. I think I've never seen such a visit before to any other country. I think there is a dedication and a commitment to the FTA between India and Europe, and we should not forget it is a time now where those who believe in global and free trade should join hands. You know, I mean, this is the time where we should sit together and try to figure out what is possible in the framework of an FTA. And at this moment, I have to say, and the Honorable Minister of Commerce is very aware of this, that the Prime Minister Modi, and the President of the Commission have agreed on a negotiated free trade agreement by the end of this year. Yeah? So we have another 8 months to get through this, and this is a sort of a clear order, I would see, and I think for the next round we'll see whether progress will be made. The other thing where I feel Europe has shown quite a strength is when we saw the up and down in the United States of America. I mean, the Commission has reacted in a very sensible way, calm but very resolved, and I think what we've seen as a reaction has shown that this reaction was the way, the approach the European Commission has taken was quite a wise and a sensible one. So, although Europe has a tendency of belittling itself and also exaggerating the difficulties in which it is right now, I think you should not underestimate the strength and the resolve Europe has right now.
Rosa, given we're here under the auspices of the good people of Carnegie, I should plug a Carnegie publication, which is, you wrote a rather good essay a few months ago talking about a strategic Europe. In his opening remarks, the External Affairs Minister had a line in which he said it was important to India that Europe was a pole in the international system and that it behaved as if it was a pole. One of the themes I've detected from this conference is, in a sense, a sort of growing Indian respect for Europe, as Europe becomes more carnivorous and less herbivorous, India it sort of sees a partner it can work with. Is there truth in that? Can India expect a stronger and more strategic Europe as a partner in future?
I do see the signs of Europe flipping the narrative away from belittling itself towards thinking far more sharply about what its actual interests are and what it needs to do to pursue them. But I don't want to gloss over the predicament in which Europe is at the moment, because there is a war in Europe. Russia is conducting a conventional warfare in Ukraine, hybrid warfare in other parts of Europe, and is trying to subvert European democracies. The United States appears to be siding with Putin's vision of the world divided into spheres of influence, so it's absolutely existential that Europe rises to the challenge. And I do see the signs of this, despite the fact that Europe has come through a long period of economic stagnation and political volatility. So what are those signs? The first is taking its security seriously at long last. This is something the Americans have been demanding for a very long time, well before Donald Trump got elected the first time. So that is happening. There are plans to support Ukraine, and there are plans to think about European security, territorial defense, and deterrence. And this is unprecedented. So it's quite an extraordinary step. And we hear here in India that India and the European Union are also talking about defense in defense cooperation in the context of the FTA negotiations. So this is something that is clearly relevant for the rest of the world. Secondly, it's, courting other countries and being courted by other countries to develop a web of trade relationships so that it can diversify its economic interdependence with the rest of the world. So I think we can see a Europe that is trying to rise to the challenge. But I do want to underscore that the context is a dangerous one, and it is a context in which, if revisionist powers have the upper hand, it's a context which is going to be harmful for other countries that believe in multilateralism, multipolarity, etc.
Let's start this next stage of the conversation and talk about trade and tariffs if you want, but particularly trade. So we have a US-India trade deal that is pending. We have an EU-India trade deal that has to be done, in theory, by the end of the year, when there should be a Europe-India summit in the final quarter of the year. Philip, let me turn to you first. Australia has signed a trade deal with India. It's called ECTA. What advice do you have about negotiating with the Indians?
Oh, first of all, we're not done yet. We've got this first phase of the free trade agreement, and that's very good, and it's working very well for both countries. I mean, just an interesting fact, India's exports to the world have grown by 35% over the last 5 years. That sounds pretty good. India's exports to Australia have grown by 66% in the same period. So, you know, massive acceleration in the character of our trade. What advice would I give? Well, the first thing I'd say, be respectful and listen. Understand each other's sensitive points and be prepared to work around them rather than go at them. Work with the grain. Secondly, you know, ECTA had some elements that were really quite innovative in terms of trade policy activity, and our trade negotiators found new points of contact with India which had been difficult for us to find for a very long time. Third, trust amongst the top negotiators was really important, and establishing a sense that we were embarked on something that we both wanted to get to, and we were prepared to go out of our way to get it and not irritate the other in the time was vital. And then be decisive. Those final days and weeks where high-level negotiations were going on line by line was, frankly, one of the most active, forward-leaning periods of Australia's trade policy, and hugely advantageous to both countries, and with great credit to those who were involved.
I'll come back to our European friends, but let's do the India-US first. Ashok, can I turn to you? I mean, the outlook for this, I presume, is that we want to have this deal done by the time of Trump's visit for the Quad Summit, but that, frustratingly, is longer than the 90-day timetable, so something needs to be done prior to the 90-day timetable to avoid a potential return of the reciprocal tariffs. So how do you see this game playing out?
Look, there could be an interim deal theoretically in the 90 days leading up to a bigger, proper deal by the autumn, by the fall. But more seriously, if the US is to sign any deal in the 90-day period, I would say the deal with India would pretty much have a very good chance, simply because the Indians and the Americans have been negotiating before almost anybody else started negotiating on tariffs and trade. We have continued and expanded on a discussion and a negotiation that began in the first Trump administration, was not taken up in the Biden administration because trade deals were not being discussed, and was picked up again in February, almost as soon as the USTR was confirmed by the Congress. So when President Trump met Prime Minister Modi, it was Prime Minister Modi who raised the idea of a trade deal and trade negotiations, even before Mr. Trump did. So I think India's been quite focused and astute in this. It's made an offer, which by Indian standards I understand is an ambitious offer. Perhaps it can lead to further negotiations. But if there is a trade deal with any country in the next 90 days, I'm pretty sure India would be one of the first.
Tanvi, I know you're not a trade specialist per se. You cover many topics, but do you have a view on this as well? Do you think this deal will kind of get over the line?
I mean, I'll make a broader point about these trade agreements. I do sense a different attitude from the Indian government on this, at least in terms of rhetoric. We obviously don't know what is in these deals. And you've heard this from the External Affairs Minister in recent weeks. You've heard this from the Commerce Minister just yesterday. His comments in Europe got a lot of attention, but he was very clear yesterday. He made a few points that are worth noting. One, he said, we need to do trade, and he also mentioned investment, not just trade. He's talked about that India needs to do more business with the world. But he also specified that India wants to do business in particular with trusted partners in the developed world. And the third thing that he mentioned, and this seemed to signal more to certain parts of, I think in terms of a domestic audience, is that it is become, that certain Indian sectors have become too used to having the domestic market and too comfortable, and that it'd actually be good for Indian consumers and things like the Indian economy, job creation, to actually engage in this process. And the reason I think this is perhaps a different moment, I think nothing is inevitable, which is also why I don't think India is sanguine. I think you see that India is not sanguine in the fact that there seems to be some sense of difference from previous attitudes about trade agreements. This government, when it came in, was not keen on trade and bilateral investment agreements. And I think it's a confluence of conditions that bring us to this point. I do think the Trump administration's approach on this is one, but I do think as well the need for additional growth and job-creating growth, as well as the fact there is another thing that perhaps adds to this moment is that politically, perhaps for the government, there is a moment, there's only one state election between now and next year, this time next year. Maybe that gives the government a little bit of space, including to socialize the public about these agreements. But I'll make two other points. I think one other thing that I get the sense at least some recognize, if not a number of people in government, is that this is not a business as usual moment for India or the world. This is a moment at the end of the day, I think, this is my view, that we have not seen since that period between 1989 and 1991. And it deserves the kind of reaction, even though it's not a crisis point like 1991 was, it deserves the kind of reaction in terms of understanding there needs to be urgency and agility, and perhaps going beyond that business as usual as India. So I do think this trade part of it is part of seeing that differently.
I'm going to go to our European colleagues now. In a sense, so Tanvi says this is not a business as usual moment. If Europe is to sign a trade deal with India by the time of the summit in the autumn, that will really be a not business as usual process for Europe, because it will mean, in effect, Europe is going to have to sign a deal similar to the Australians, a sort of stage one deal. You can't do a full Europe-style FTA in 6 months. So, Ambassador Ackerman, do you think this is going to happen?
Yeah, I think, it's no secret that the European Union is not an easy partner when it comes to FTAs. Not only do we have 27 different member states with different priorities, but also we tend to go for this comprehensiveness, in the FTAs. And I think Tanvi is right. This is not something we can, it's not the same pattern that we did with Canada or New Zealand or something. It has to be different, and that means also the European side has to adapt to the realities. But adapting to realities doesn't mean, and that's also valid for the American thing, that you throw your convictions overboard. You have to see what you can do. I'm very convinced that if both sides are serious and they are really willing to come to a conclusion, they will be able to do it. That it is not maybe the full-fledged Canada-CETA deal, clearly, but it's maybe more than the Australia deal also. So I think let's see what comes out of it. I'm pretty convinced that I'm convinced because I think now is the moment, actually. Now is the moment to show that we believe in global trade. And I think the investment part, which the Indian side emphasizes, is an important part of this. The investment part is important, and I think it will also come. For the German business in India, an FTA will be a game changer, and that will bring new investment in India, there is no doubt.
More than an Australia deal. This now sounds like a contest between ambassadors named Philip in Delhi for who can get the best FTA.
So can I say my friend Philip said that they are not done yet. That's why I can say more than the Australia day on the first stage, because they are working on the next stage.
I like this Philip-based competition over Indian trade policies. It's terrific. Rosa, may I ask the same question? Do you share the ambassador's optimism? In a sense, I'm interested in this because were Europe, in a sense, to compromise on its traditional FTA model in order to do a trade deal with India at an accelerated timescale, it would be a real indicator of the kind of geopolitical impetus and a change in approach from Europe. And so, do you think it'll happen?
Well, let's be honest, the shift away from comprehensive trade deals that included everything on climate, on labor standards, on health and safety was already happening. Europe wasn't getting its way and was receiving a lot of pushback from countries around the world but also from Europeans who were, protesting against, for instance, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and against the agreement with CETA. So I think we were in that space anyway. So what is important? Number one is to lock in relationships through trade. Number two, to continue the conversation on all those things that might not get in the trade agreement, but that are important. And I do think Europe has a special role to play, together with others, in supporting what we call global commons or global public goods, which are very much related to climate, related to technology, related to all those trends that escape state control. Because what we have is a trend in which several states are trying to maintain and extend national control undemocratically, and we have a number of trends that go beyond states and that need to be regulated. And I think the EU definitely, and European countries, are in that camp of countries that want to think about global commons together with others. So I think that's the sort of way in which a thinner FTA can be compensated through different types of conversation.
Excellent. You may not see this, but I can see it. There's a clock ticking down at the front. We're now halfway through our time, and I've been given very strict instructions by Rudra Chaudhry that we're to end precisely on time. I want to ask about China, and I also want to ask about the opportunity for India, and we'll see if we can squeeze in a couple of audience questions as well. But first I want to go to Evan, in a sense, to talk about the balance between the US and China in the region. We face a curious next year because, in one sense, the US is going to be at the very center of Asian economic diplomacy. It's going to be negotiating with India, with Japan, with everybody else. At another level, it seems that the US is really abdicating its role as a leader in Asia. And you have this wonderful phrase where you have warned against the United States becoming the Hessians of Asia. I wonder, could you explain what you mean by that? And in a sense, what game you think the US is playing in terms of economic statecraft at the moment?
Yeah, I can explain that. I mean, to explain it gets at actually the way the region is changing and whether and how the U.S. is adapting. And as is implicit in my use of the phrase, the U.S., in my view, is not really adapting. If you think about why the United States was a leader in Asia, by which I really mean East Asia, in the post-World War II period, but particularly after the 1960s, it was because it was the principal provider of both security-related public goods and economic-related public goods and other benefits. And in the security realm, because everybody's largely afraid of you-know-who.
We'll get to them in a minute.
Okay. Just to be blunt about it, most countries in the region are scared of China. And because they're scared of China, the United States is, and for much of the region will continue as far as my eyes can see, to either be a direct security provider or an indirect security provider through the security-related public goods that it provides through things like alliances, forward-deployed military presence, carrier battle groups. In other words, we sail boats and fly planes around, and we're good at it. And that's both instrumentally and strategically useful in the region. But that was never the end of the story for the United States in the region. The United States was also a leader here because it was an economic public goods provider, not least by, as I said earlier in answer to your first question to me, by being, for example, the demand that kept its market open to Asia's export-led economies that powered their way to prosperity on the back of American demand. And the United States was a standard setter. So there's no basis for collective security in East Asia until China and Japan have a moment analogous to France and Germany in Europe. And that being the case, as I said, the United States will be the principal provider of security directly or indirectly for most countries not called China. But on the economic side, the US demand profile, I'm sorry, it's shrinking in the region. US trade with every country in Asia is going up in absolute terms. It's declining everywhere in relative terms. And there's much more intra-Asian trade, and the region is becoming more Asian and less Pacific. And if that's happening for structural reasons, then if you want to continue to play that economic role, you need to fall back on the other pillar, which was to be a standard setter, rule writer, and norm giver. But what we've seen over the last decade or so is the United States progressively withdrawing from that role. The US pulled out, there are 3 trade agreements, for example, since we were talking about trade agreements, in that part of the world that set standards, the CPTPP, the RCEP, the DIPA. The United States is on the outside of not 1, not 2, but all 3 of them. Now, to go to your direct question, and then I'll stop, does that mean the region is bipolar between the US and China? No, because everybody's still afraid of China, but also because there are a lot of large, capable, self-interested countries in Asia, including but not limited to India, also Japan, South Korea, Australia, that have something to say about the way the region is going to shape up and have power and capacity that they can bring to problems. And so you see that on things like trade rules, but also on functions that really matter. Online authentication and data access control, project finance, cross-border investment. There's lots of Japanese money flowing around the region. And so that being the case, the region is not really bipolar. It's heading for something that's more like fragmentation, where on different functions, different coalitions of countries are going to drive the rules. And CPTPP is the best example of that, right? President Obama said the US has to be in CPTPP. Why? Because if we don't write the rules, China's going to write the rules. He literally said it. It's a verbatim quote. So that's bipolarity. But that's not what happened. When President Trump took the US out of TPP, China did not come in and write the rules. Instead, the other 11 got together, solidified the agreement, and neither the United States nor China was party to the agreement. So that to me suggests, I don't know if you want to call it multipolarity, I call it kind of fragmentation, diversity. The United States needs to be adaptive to that Asia. And what I meant by Hessians was I see the US abdicating the standard setting role, shrinking in the demand role. It's being exacerbated by protectionism in the United States, and we don't want to end up in a position where we're basically just the security provider sailing boats and flying planes around. Because what that means is the region will become more Asian and less Pacific on functions that actually matter to American interests. And I think that's a trend line that's concerned me for 15 years. It's not specific to Trump. And it really goes back, if I'm going to be blunt about it, to the Asian financial crisis in the 90s. So that's what.
So we'll come to you-know-who in a minute, but Philip, you wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, I did. I'm very glad that Evan believes that the United States will continue to be a key security provider in the Indo-Pacific, and I totally agree with that. And I'm glad, but it is true, of course, that Australian governments, as a matter of long history, have sought the US's deeper engagement with the trade and economic affairs of our region. And it was a disappointment to us when the US removed itself from TPP. But look what happened. At that moment, everyone thought it was dead. Everyone thought it was over. And it was Japanese and Australian diplomacy that resuscitated it. I know, but Australian... And this moment is a moment where we will need more of that diplomacy by those parts of the region. But I want to make another point. So we are here at the Global Technology Summit. And if the United States isn't operating in terms of regional trade in the way in which we would be best pleased, we are seeing the United States step forward in relation to regional technology issues. And first with ISET and now with Trust, we are seeing sequential US governments focused on this core area for strategic balance in the region. And that is to be applauded.
Let me ask about China. In a sense, there are 3 relationships here, and my sense is everyone is nervous about everybody else. So the Europeans are worried that India and China are going to get closer. The Indians are worried that Europe and China are going to get closer. And everyone's worried that the Americans may do a deal with the Chinese, even in unexpected scenarios. So in a sense, who's right? Let's start with India. Tanvi, do you see, we see a sort of moderation, I think it's fair to say, a normalization at a low level of India-China ties. Is something more than that possible over the coming year?
You know, I don't think we've seen, and I think you've heard a number of folks say this, is you have seen an effort to stabilize ties, seeing what's possible. Have developments in the US contributed to it? Yes, but there are also contributions in terms of the broader strategic and economic pressure that Beijing was facing, perhaps. Some calls for kind of some selective re-engagement here, economic re-engagement here. So you did see this process, which, by the way, was not a post US election process. You have seen China and India, I saw signs from almost a year ago that an agreement was possible and to disengage. So I think you have seen the beginnings of a process, and the way that it was put is getting the path to normalization has opened up, and now the two sides have to walk it. And seems to be, the countries seem to be taking that on a step-by-step basis, or at least that seems to be India's preference. You still hear sometimes from Beijing that, we've sorted that out, now let's just focus on the relationship. And you are seeing a Beijing that every day, and you see this on the a couple of the Chinese embassy accounts here, you're seeing it repeatedly, this sense of actually trying to say that one of the reasons India and China should do more together, including in Asia, is because look at what the US is doing. India is not taking that bait, and I think one of the reasons you're seeing India not taking that bait is it is structurally still a rivalry. There is you have not seen any changes in the kind of structural problems that the two countries have. For every sign or meeting that you have, you are seeing those competitive instincts between the two countries. So are we going to see more? Yes, we might see more steps. I think it depends on whether both sides think they're getting from this dialogue, what they think is going to get them to move forward. But I think, and you could even see the topic of economic types have come up. I've said before, I think there will be certain areas, there will be selective economic re-engagement. I think the minister was clear yesterday. He does not see India joining RCEP, for example, or having that deep trade or at least investment relationship with China that some would like. But nonetheless, I do think you've already seen some signs of that. But I do not see, unless China makes an offer to India to take it off the table in some ways and changes its behavior radically, that you are going to see a massive shift. One other thing that just worries, when you talk about people worrying about relation, the thing that people used to worry about when they saw China and India talking in the US, elsewhere, was that if China and India were getting along, or because India was concerned about provoking China, it would stop doing things with the US, with the Quad and others. We have not seen any signs of that, or any major signs of that in the last few months, even as India has been on this normalization process.
Ashok, same question to you, but in a slightly different way. We saw again my colleague Anka's interview with Piyush Goyal. He again sort of appeared to rule out BYD investment in India, said he preferred India doing business with developed economies rather than China. Nonetheless, there are two areas in which sort of India and China have an incentive to become more entwined. One is manufacturing, where Chinese inputs are necessary and FDI is necessary. There's been a debate about that. The other is the green transition, where it is tempting to meet green transition targets using Chinese technology, batteries, turbines. In a sense, is it possible to have a China-free supply chain for India?
In some cases, no. In some cases, frankly, we just have to. I'll give you one example of an area where a China-free supply chain is and was possible for all our countries: COVID vaccines. I worked on it when I was in the ministry. And you either had a China supply chain COVID vaccine, or you had a non-China supply chain COVID vaccine involving India, Australia, Poland, America, all countries. Anyway, that's besides the point. How does India approach China? Look, it's complex. China is India's largest trading partner in most years. In some years, it's the United States. China is a very significant economy. It's not going to go away. To boycott China is to punish Indian consumers. If my daughter wants to buy a laptop to do homework, chances are she'll buy something made in China, even if it has a US brand or a Japanese brand. Indian manufacturing, as it grows, as it advances, will need more and more cooperation with China, more equipment from China, more ingredients from China, more machines from China. The more iPhones we make, the more components we import. Having said that, and perhaps that should continue even faster than it is. Having said that, there are other areas where China remains a concern. One, the political relationship is still too poor, and I suspect will remain too poor, for Chinese companies to be allowed into public procurement in India. That's over. Second, India's economic transformation is coinciding with the digital moment. And digital technologies pose risk of permeation, of infiltration in a way traditional technologies did not. So if you look at electric vehicles, which are data ingesters, if you look at AI, if you look at semiconductors, if you look at quantum computing, if you look at advanced biology or biotech, frankly, it's not just a question of diversification from China, it's a question of decoupling. And if that means greater short-term cost, they'll have to be borne. In telecom, we had to bear that. We kept out Huawei. The European companies, which were not as inexpensive, gained. Finally, India is very conscious and sensitive to dumping by China in not just in high-end goods, but also in low-end goods. Where the reason we did not sign onto RCEP is because our experience with trade deals with countries to our east, ASEAN countries broadly, in the early 2000s, led to a situation where eventually all supply chains seemed to lead to China, and Chinese goods were flooding our markets. Not just Chinese electric vehicles and semiconductors, but Chinese frying pans. And that poses not just an economic challenge to India, but also a social dislocation.
Let me ask the same question to our European guests. First to Rosa at the European level, and then second to Philip at the German level, given you have a new government. Again, everyone is worried about relations between their own country and China. I mean, in a sense, is Europe also going to go through a moment of normalization with China, do you think?
I think Europe has shifted considerably on China, and it's not just because the Biden administration pushed it in that direction. It's because of China's behavior. I mean, Europe really has an issue with the lack of reciprocity and has been developing a whole set of tools to protect its economic security, while at the same time differentiating itself even from the Biden administration, which is a friendly administration in the sense that it has always argued that on certain issues it does want to talk with China. And I actually think that that position will be maintained, that Europeans, yes, there was a phone call the other day about how to handle the tariffs between the President of the Commission and the Prime Minister, but that was of China, but that was to avoid China flooding the European market with cheap goods. So I think that balance will be maintained. And there's a paradoxical reason for which that balance will be maintained, and that is that actually European countries disagree quite a lot on how to deal with China. They have quite different types of dependencies with China. Some are dependent on China for exports, others for imports or FDIs, etc. But precisely because there is that diversity, it's actually very hard to have a single hawkish position. So I think that is my expectation, that at least that there will be an attempt to keep that distance and to keep focused on economic security and on and balance between economic security and free trade and global commons, etc.
Philip, you have a new government, you have a new chancellor. The chancellor is from a centre-right party that traditionally has had a strong relationship with business. German business is generally very keen on doing business with China. On the other hand, your new chancellor has been quite outspoken. The new coalition agreement signed recently seems to be reasonably robust on Germany's position with China. Can you give us a sense of Germany's position on this?
I think it's wonderful that everybody thinks we have a new government. We don't, actually. But, you know, Germany is so reliable that you think we have a new government, and everybody
will soon have a new government.
In a couple of weeks, 2 weeks maybe. But I think I can say with some conviction that, you know, the position of Germany when it comes to China will not change. I think one should not get confused that we are now together with China against some you know, power that wants to unwind the global trade and global business. Doesn't mean that we think that China is a better partner through this. I think we have the same problems with China like we had before, and I think Rosa is completely right when she says there is a growing discomfort in Europe, and you know, when it comes to my government, we have always seen, you know, these 3 steps: China as an economic partner, a competitor, and a systemic rival. And when you read this coalition contract paper, you'll find that the systemic rival is very, very strongly emphasized in this. So basically, I think for us, we will continue this, what we call the de-risking strategy. Yeah? We will try to encourage German business to go elsewhere, not to put all their eggs in one basket. And India is an important country in this encouragement, and that's, and I'm coming back to what I said before, is a good reason to have a very solid free trade agreement.
Very good. So we've heard from our panel that we, in a sense, have a moment of profound geopolitical change. We also have only 10 minutes to go in our own panel, and I would like to I want to close by asking each of my panelists what the opportunity is for India. So you can all think about at least one thing that it should be an opportunity for India, but I would like to just take a couple of audience questions. Let me see, whose hand did I see go up first? So, sir, I'm only going to take a couple because we don't have a huge amount of time, and then I'll go over to this, the gentleman in the front here. If you'd introduce yourself, and I humbly request very brief questions with a question mark at the end, not a long-winded contribution. Sir.
My name is Akash. I am a researcher in science and technology policy, and I am student of geopolitics also. My question is to Evan. How do you see the future of alliance politics with the recent happenings that have been there with the unilateral measures? And what role does the non-state actors like private companies or say tech giants play in those alliances? And how do you see the future of alliance politics?
Okay, well, that's a very narrow question, Evan. You're only going to have a minute to answer that. Sir.
Thank you. My name is Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador. The question actually I have for the panel really is this, that in the entire discussion here, but I find it generally discourse in geopolitics and power equations and all that, the issue of climate change, global warming, is completely missing. And the fact that nowadays the reports are coming that by the end of the century, I think the temperature will cross about 3 degrees centigrade. And the stress being caused by this phenomenon, growing phenomenon, on the internal situation in all countries is actually aggravating internal situations, causing stress on the systems. So, in fact, now the report about that, in terms of insurance policies for housing and so on and so forth is going to already starting to cause problems. The question really is this, that aware of this kind of menacing threat, which actually is already started, everybody's feeling it, in our neighborhood, India, everywhere. Are we going to revisit the entire outlook towards power equations? Are we going to think about international relations a little differently?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to take one more. You, sir, at the back. I was looking for, anyway, there we go. One, and that's it. Sorry, I did see other hands, but I can't take all of them. Again, identify yourself.
Hi. Thanks, James. This is Rahul. I work at the intersection of tech and geopolitics. You mentioned the profoundness from the panel. Blessed to have a panel like this at the end of the day, but maybe it's a sign of the times that everyone's been talking about economic interests and transactional relations, and no one's really touched upon the 3 major conflicts from my perspective anyway, because I spent a lot of time in Myanmar, so I count that as a 3rd conflict. There's tens of thousands of people dying in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Myanmar, but no one on the panel has touched that at all.
Okay.
I'm not saying, but I guess the question then is, where does that feature in the geopolitics of the next year? Where does that feature in the alliances of the world? Is there a binary solution to it, considering we are in a tech conference where things can get binary?
Okay. All right. Now, panelists, you have about a minute each before we run out of time, so this is going to be difficult. Evan, you had a specific question about alliance politics, and I'd also like an opportunity for India thought from you as from everyone else. So why don't you go first?
Okay. Yeah, I can't address all aspects of the alliance question because you threw in business and civic groups. Why don't I just focus at the strategic level? First point, it's just a fact. The United States is currently introducing a lot of stress into its alliance relationships. It's a fact. And it's intellectually unserious to pretend otherwise. I think it's a little less salient in Asia, and it's manifesting itself in Asia differently than in Europe. But the problem is that the United States is increasingly China-centric in its approach to the region, and that's going to stress these alliances in a different set of ways. I'll be quick, I promise. I work for a guy named Rich Armitage. He was Deputy Secretary of State. Rich had a famous saying. He said, if you want to get China right, you got to get Asia right. But the US has kind of flipped that. Increasingly, we're making every relationship policy initiative in Asia derivative of the focus on China. And the fact is, American allies have not securitized their approaches to China, particularly on the economic side, to the degree the US has. And that's going to stress these because it means the US is going to have to coerce compliance by extraterritorializing things like export controls, investment restrictions, and so on. And so that's going to be layered on top of the fact that the five treaty allies for the US and the region are not entirely on the same page, either on China or on regional order. Thailand's not Japan. Japan, not even Australia. So that's a short answer. On India, my thing would be to say, when I first started coming to India, everybody in the United States used to say India was this place that needed to be reformed. So it was like India was this object that needed to be reformed. But if you've sat through this conference, as I have for a lot of years, all sorts of interesting stuff is happening in India, like all the stuff that Rudra's doing on DPIs, where India's developing models and innovating things that actually can be exported and scaled and that can be a model for other parts of the world. So to me, that's the opportunity, right? Like if I'm sitting in Africa or the Middle East, or I'm thinking about bringing people into the organized financial system, the United States doesn't really have much to offer compared to India in terms of ideas that have been pioneered here. So you go from object to subject, and India exporting its reform story and its own innovation story is, to me, that's where the opportunity.
Philip, I don't know if you want very briefly to pick up the excellent climate change point and also give us an opportunity for India as well.
So super briefly on both the questions about regional conflicts and about climate change. The reality is we live in a time of great power contestation. And that makes it harder for the global community and us diplomats to eke out enough time and space to deal with the regional problems and this huge generational problem of climate change. I don't have the answer to that. All I can say is that the word that jangles around our system, reverberates around our system, is agency. That countries of the size of Australia need to engage with utmost agency to do what we can to try to resolve these problems as great power contestation flows through.
Opportunity for India?
Reform.
Okay. Let me go to Rosa. I wonder, if you would like, you had a mention of Ukraine. I thought you might want to say a word about that, and again, an opportunity for India in this moment.
Well, I mean, there's one thing, there's, I can sense quite a bit of glee at the decline of the United States as a hegemonic power, but I think we should remember that with hegemony comes responsibility. So if power is diffused towards a multilateral order, that means that these poles of the global relations need to take responsibility. And I think the responsibility really has to be towards peace and addressing conflicts. And you mentioned there's also Sudan, Ukraine, Gaza, Myanmar. It's only getting worse because great power rivalry encourages adventurism on part of regional actors, middle-sized actors, and climate. I mean, there is a planet that ought to be, at least needs to adapt to the reality of climate change. So I think for India as well, the idea of thinking about what kind of responsibility it can take on its shoulders so that it can have a greater say in global affairs, and how, together with other allies, it can work in the international organizations that at the moment are pretty much bankrupt. How can we work together to address those global commons? That, to me, is an opportunity for India as well.
Ambassador, can I just jump in, because I think it's exactly what my point would have been. It's an India moment right now. The world is looking with great sympathy and great positivism at India. I would even say India is courted, generally speaking, and that means that this India moment can be used in a way that India is a proactive partner, a popular partner in the international setup. And I want to quote one specific example because it was mentioned. India was, at the end of COP, Baku, basically isolated. And it is very strange that, it was alone. And I would hope that India now, in this context, gets a more constructive and more proactive negotiation approach, and it is more sort of constructive at the table. I think that would be the India moment I would wish for.
And so, Ashok and Tanvi, both as, in a sense, India specialists, can you give us an opportunity for India to close? Maybe Ashok first and then Tanvi. Okay, Tanvi first and then Ashok. Don't be too modest.
I'm going to use an Americanism. If you build it, they will come. And yesterday, Nandan Nilekani pointed out that the things India needs to do, it's not about what's going on about, our internal. And if India builds the environment, capital is looking for places, countries are looking for partners, the region is looking for leadership. If India offers it, India will have that opportunity.
Ashok, final word to you.
Well, what will India do in the coming year? Quite honestly, hunker down, look inwards, show great urgency, long overdue, in signing trade deals with compatible partners such as the US, the EU, New Zealand, the UK. These are not trade deals that really threaten India in a way a trade deal with China would. I think there's great keenness and urgency to actually do those. Second, in a world which is perhaps moving towards spheres of influence and regions of influence, and certainly more great power competition, India needs to work much more closely with its immediate neighbors, because great power competition is coming very, very, very close to our borders.
Very good. This has been a fantastic event, and I think this has been a fantastic panel, so please give my panelists a big round of applause. Thank you very much for a great discussion. And I think this marks the end of the event. I will hand back to our hosts at Carnegie if someone wants to close, otherwise we will draw proceedings to a close. There we go. Thank you very much.
May I request the audience to please remain seated. Thank you, dear panelists, for a riveting conversation on the possibilities of this geopolitical and geoeconomic moment. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of Carnegie India's Global Technology Summit 2025. I would like to take a moment to thank you all, panelists, speakers, moderators, and the audience for being a part of this impactful journey of ideas and knowledge exchanges over the past 3 days of conversations, both public and behind closed doors. We've had discussions on a range of topics, from AI, defense technologies, space, geopolitics, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, DPI. We hope these conversations have helped move the policy needle forward. None of these conversations would have been possible without key stakeholders whom I'd like to take a moment to thank. First of all, I'd like to thank the co-host, the Policy Planning and Research Division of the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, led by Mr. Raghuram, our philanthropy partner, Tata Trust, summit partners, Meta, Microsoft, TCS, Salesforce, Google, SAP, LinkedIn, Qualcomm, IBM, MasterCard, and Amazon, knowledge partners, Co-Develop, Gates Foundation, CDPI, AkeStep, GMF, King's College London Centre for Grand Strategy, COSS, Premji Invest, United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, our media partners, AsiaNet, ANI, digital partner, The Print, green partner, the Gen Z, and we have with us a cohort of young ambassadors from institutions which are academic partners, BML Munjal University, Center for Responsible AI, IIT Madras, IIIT Bangalore, IIIT Delhi, Kautilya School of Public Policy, Munjal Institute for Global Manufacturing at the Indian School of Business, Indian School of Public Policy, and NUGS, Kolkata. Last but certainly not the least, the Carnegie India team. But before we leave, we have a closing video to reflect on the verve of the past 3 days and the exciting conversations that have taken place. Can I have the video, please?
we think that AI is not easy, but India will be uniquely placed because of its history, and it will combine DPI and AI to create a whole new way of doing things.
Now, since I'm in government, I feel incentives are a crutch. All the policies are enablers, so government can lay a route. But who has to drive on it? It's the private sector.
I think we need to have the courage and the honesty to say, yes, we are in it for ourselves. And even if it is going against the trend of the world, I will do what I feel is in mind.
85% of all big tech companies and also AI companies are US-based, 5 to 7% China-based, and you, India, and we, European Union, share the rest of the business cake.
The one thing that constantly is thrown on my face is Africa cannot afford AI. And for me, DeepSeek was that aha moment, that you can do it with no resources at all.
The world is connected, whether we want it or not, through tariffs, through trade, through payments. So one bad actor on the African continent can bring down global trade. So I think the opportunity is let us hold hands with Africa. We have shown our adaptability rate is high.
I think the delta as a result of the Data Protection Act would be least for a financial sector entity for the fact that already there are several laws, regulations and governance structures in place which are impacting the sector today.
I suspect the BTA will be done sooner rather than later, and that will be a first for India. What we have to get over is serial disruption.
The EU Commission yesterday announced that they want to review the EU AI Act and to see if there are parts of the AI Act that indeed hindered innovation within the European Union or worldwide. So we are open for such a discussion.
The GTS has so far been an excellent event to convene so many experts from various fields, from government, private sector, civil society, researchers, and academia.
This summit gives you a perspective about what do we think about technology and public policy, which is such a nascent space to even understand that where tech and public policy is, because that is what our minister said that, right? Trust and tariffs and technology is something that we'll be looking forward to.
There's nothing like GTS. There's no other event in India or with India that involves such a range of interactions between technology, political, economic, financial people. It's really a unique and special event.
Countries like India who have gone a very good trajectory in developing different solutions. I think for countries in Africa, this is a very good opportunity not to reinvent the wheel and then learn from the good experiences of India. Events like this bring together these solutions, also share the challenges. So there's a lot of lessons learned to be harvested. That's why I think this is a very good platform.
I'm really thankful to Carnegie India for inviting us to come here and be a part of a summit like this, because I think it really adds value to what we have to say as well. I think all the conversations that have taken place makes me really hopeful for the future of technology and the people who are working behind it.
With that, GTS 2025 comes to a close. Thank you, everyone. Dinner is served, and we look forward to welcoming you at the next edition of the Global Technology Summit.